Welcome to Dream or a Night, everyone. The place where we come together to listen, to unwind, and to drift gently into that sweet, peaceful sleep we all crave. I'm Daniel, your host tonight, and oh, how grateful I am that you've chosen to spend this quiet evening with us. Thank you so much for being here. Good evening, folks, and welcome back. Can you believe we're about to dive into one of the most jaw-dropping, heart-pounding legends humanity has ever dreamed up? The dragon. Seriously, stop for a second and think about it. Why on earth do people from every corner of the planet, China, Europe, Africa, the Americas, everywhere, tell stories about these colossal, scaly beasts that either spit fire like living volcanoes or command entire oceans with a flick of their tails? Where did this obsession come from? How did the exact same impossible creature show up in places that never even talk to each other? Tonight, we're going on a wild ride through the very oldest dragon tales. From the dusty rivers of Mesopotamia all the way to the misty mountains of ancient China and beyond. And I promise you, by the end, you're going to feel the scales on your own skin. I'm dying to know, where are you tuning in from right now? Is it midnight where you are? Or are you sneaking a listen with your morning coffee? Drop it in the chat, because I love picturing all of us gathered around the same campfire, eyes wide, while these ancient stories crackle back to life. Ready? Let's do this. Okay, deep breath. Here we go. If you rewind all the way to the very first stories ever scratched into clay, the world doesn't open with pretty flowers and gentle sunlight. No, it explodes into existence with a storm so violent it rattles your bones, and a fight that makes your pulse race. And the enemy? Forget human kings or rival tribes. The enemy is a serpent so gigantic, it is the sea itself. In ancient Mesopotamia, the scribes pressed their reeds into wet clay and gave her a name that still echoes like thunder. Tiamat, the mother of all gods. A roaring primordial ocean that took the shape of a dragon the size of the horizon. Can you even imagine staring at that? Then comes the moment that gave me chills the first time I read it. In the Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish, yeah, try saying that 5 times fast, a young god named Marduk steps up. All the other gods are trembling, but Marduk, he's like, hold my beer, hate the above us. He weaves a giant net, calls every wind in the universe until the sky screams, and when Tiamat opens her cavernous jaws to swallow him whole, bam! The winds rush in, pry her mouth open like a living trap, and Marduk fires an arrow straight through her heart. I get goosebumps every single time. And then, oh man, then he does the most mind-blowing thing. He slices her in half. One half becomes the dome of the heavens you're looking at right now. The other half becomes the ground under your feet. Rivers burst from her eyes like tears of a dying titan, carving the first life-giving channels across the land. Her broken body literally becomes the map of everything we call home. Creation isn't some sweet little garden party. It's the brutal, triumphant taming of a monster. How wild is that? That raw, terrifying idea runs like electricity through every ancient culture in the Near East. The Hittites told a story that still haunts me. Their storm gods squared off against a serpent named Iluyanka, and in one version, the snake rips out the god's eyes and heart. Imagine a world suddenly blind and gutless. That's the nightmare they were wrestling with. But hope isn't dead. Through cleverness, a goddess's feast, and ropes that bite like iron. The serpent is bound and butchered, and the god gets his sight and courage back. In another telling, it's even darker. The god has to sacrifice his own son in the final duel. These aren't just adventure stories, friends. They're gut-wrenching parables screaming, "Order costs everything, and a true king will pay it." Fast forward to the Levantine coast, and clay tablets from Ugarit give us Baal, the storm lord, throwing down with a seven-headed sea serpent named Lotan, the fleeing serpent, the twisting serpent. Sound familiar? Centuries later, those exact words echo in the Hebrew Bible, when Leviathan rises like a nightmare from the deep. In the Psalms, the heads of sea monsters are crushed like grapes. In Job, Leviathan laughs, actually laughs, at spears, snorting smoke and turning iron into straw. The message hits you like a freight train. The world is packed with forces that mock everything we are, and only a power far greater than us can ever hope to master them. Egypt took that terror and made it daily. Every single night, the sun god Ra sails his golden boat through the underworld's black river, and every single night, the serpent Apep lunges up, hungry for eternal darkness. Priests wrote entire libraries of spells to bind him, hack him to pieces, spit on his very name. They moulded wax figures of Apep and stomped them, stabbed them, burned them to ash so the real monster would feel it and the dawn would be allowed to come back. But here's the beautiful twist on temple walls. You see Ma'at, the good serpent, lovingly coiled around Ra's boat like a living shield. You can almost hear the Nile itself breathing in that rhythm. Flood, recede, rise, set please, gods, let the seasons hold. And not every serpent was the bad guy. Walk through Babylon's dazzling Ishtar Gate, those electric blue bricks, and you'll meet the Mushushu, a dragon with a serpent's body, lion legs, eagle talons, and horns that scream power. But this one isn't chaos. It's the tamed, loyal strength of Marduk and Nabu, standing guard over the city. Same body, same scales, totally different soul. Isn't that incredible? The creature isn't good or evil. It's where it stands in the order of things that decides everything. Then Persia hands us pure nightmare fuel. Aji Dahaka, a three-headed dragon dripping drought and lies, later called Zahak, with living snakes sprouting from his shoulders because he kissed the wrong tempter. He's finally chained to a mountain until the end of time, and that image dragon bound so the world can breathe shows up again and again. Tie the monster, and rivers flow. Let it loose, and the wells choke to dust. For people who lived or died by seasonal rains, that metaphor hit harder than any hammer. All these stories, from Babylon to Persia, boil down to one heart-stopping shape: a serpent or sea dragon that is raw, world-unraveling power. Flood, drought, plague, eclipse, war. It doesn't matter what form the chaos takes. Ancient storytellers gave it fangs and coils. When the river rages out of season, the snake is thrashing. When the blessed black silt spreads right on time, the snake is finally leashed. The language is mythic, but the fear, that's as real as hunger. Because here's the thing that grabs me by the throat every time. People just wanted to live. They wanted to plant seed, watch kids grow tall, wake up tomorrow. For that to happen, somebody, god, king, priest, had to stare down the monster. And these myths trained entire civilizations to measure their leaders by one brutal standard. A good king is a serpent slayer or a serpent binder. He's the one who knots chaos and makes the water run where it's supposed to. Look at Egypt priests stomping wax apep into the dust every morning to prove Pharaoh's power still held. Look at the Enuma Elish ending with the gods handing Marduk 50 glorious names and the crown of everything. Even that proud Mushushu on Babylon's gate is shouting to every traveller, "This city has the wild on a leash." Politics wrapped in scales, my friends, pure politics. Art locked the memory in stone and clay forever. Tiny cylinder seals show serpents twined around temples like living vines. Reliefs give Babylon's dragon a forked tongue that looks ready to taste your fear. Nile tombs paint the good solar serpent guarding the night boat, while its evil twin lunges from the dark. These aren't decorations. These are arguments carved in eternity. The world holds because the serpent has been given a place, either in chains or in service. Every spring, when a farmer drags his plough in a perfect straight line across a field that will flood and drain on schedule, he's retelling the story without saying a word. So, why did every ancient culture look at chaos and see the exact same scaly face? Part of it is raw, terrifying experience. Huge snakes can startle you out of 10 years of life, even if you grew up with them. Nile crocodiles exploding out of muddy water look exactly like dragons on a bad day. Storms make the ocean itself coil and hiss like a living ridge of muscle. Nature handed them the blueprint every single year. And then there are the bones. Oh, the bones. All across Asia, people dug up massive fossils ribs like ship timbers, jaws full of swords, and whispered, "Dragon bones." Centuries later, apothecaries ground them into medicine, but long before science, finding a single tooth bigger than your head was proof the stories were true. You don't need the word dinosaur to feel something ancient and inhuman once ruled the earth. Your mind just adds the smoke and scales and keeps the tale growing. Step back and the pattern is breathtaking. Mesopotamia hangs the sky on a slain dragon's bones. Egypt fights the same battle every night so the sun can rise again. Anatolia's storm god has to win his own heart back from the snake. Canaan throws a seven-headed horror against the rain god. Israel claims the victory for the Lord alone. Persia chains a plague dragon until the final day. Same serpent, different accent, every culture screaming, "This is what must be mastered." Flood, drought, darkness, tyranny, or life stops. That, my friends, is why the Serpent of Chaos is the very first dragon we ever met. Before the glittering wings, before the mountain of gold, before knights and lances, there was a river god with a net, a priest with a flint knife, and a king promising to hold back the dark. The dragon began as the shape of the problem. How do you turn terror into order? How do you make tomorrow come again? Their answer still rings like a war cry across 5,000 years. You find the serpent, and you either chain it, or you bury your blade in its heart. Are you feeling the shivers yet? Because we're only just getting started. Oh man, hang on to your seats. Because before we ever dreamed of knights in shining armor, before glittering wings blotted out the sun or mountains of gold gleamed in torchlight, before any lance ever flashed, the dragon was already there, and it was terrifying. Picture this: a lonely river god clutching a net made of moonlight and storm, a trembling priest raising a knife carved from flint, a king standing on the bank at midnight, swearing to every frightened face behind him, "I will hold back the dark." Can you feel that chill? That's the very first dragon, folks, the original nightmare wearing scales. It wasn't a monster for sport. It was the shape of the problem itself. How do you take pure danger, floods that swallow villages, droughts that crack the earth like old pottery, nights that feel like they might never end, and turn it into order? How do you make tomorrow actually show up again? The ancients didn't sugarcoat it. Their answer was raw and brutal. You hunt the serpent down, and you either chain it or you drive cold steel through its heart. Those old storytellers never let the serpent slither off into the shadows alone. No way. They planted a hero right in its path, handed him a name, a weapon, and a reason worth dying for. The scenery changes, deserts, mountains, oceans. The names shift, but the skeleton of the story, rock solid. The world is broken. Water is locked away or roaring out of control. Crops wither. Kids cry from hunger. Cities tremble. Then, out of nowhere, a god or a mortal champion shoulders through the crowd, stares into those glowing eyes and says, "Not today." This isn't some friendly wrestling match. This is a bare-knuckled fight for a world worth living in. Take India's Rig Veda. Those ancient hymns still ring like war drums. The storm god Indra downs a sacred drink that sets his veins on fire, hefts a thunderbolt that could split mountains, and charges a dragon named Vritra, who's literally hogging all the water. The land is dying, cracking open like a broken plate. Indra swings, and bam! Mountains explode, cattle stampede for joy, and 7 mighty rivers burst free, like they've been holding their breath for years. That's not just poetry, friends. That's a whole river valley, jumping up and cheering, because the flood finally came right on time. Later, singers added extra spice, the thunderbolt forged by a divine craftsman, a sage actually donating his own bones so the weapon would hit harder. But the heart of it never changes. Storm plus courage equals life. Same story echoes across the Iranian plateau with a hero named Thraitaona facing Aji-Dahaka, a many-headed horror-carrying famine and lies worse than any empty well. One swing, and the land breathes again. People fall on their knees and call him Restorer. And in some versions, they don't even kill the beast. They chain him to a mountain until the end of time, because sometimes the smartest victory is keeping the monster on a leash so the seasons stay honest. Head west, and there's Baal, the Storm King of Canaan, slugging it out with Lotan, the 7-headed fleeing, twisting serpent on a coastline that still smells like salt and lightning. 7 heads. Not just a big number. 7 means total, overflowing, never-ending power. Cut one off, and another snaps at you. Only a god who rules thunder can prove he's stronger than chaos that keeps coming back. Centuries later, Israelite poets borrow the exact same image when they sing about the Lord smashing Leviathan's heads like kindling. Same dragon, new voice, same roar. Anything that rises against life gets broken. Then Greece grabs the tail and runs with it across islands and jagged peaks. Suddenly, the dragon's guarding springs, sacred groves, golden treasures. Zeus hurls lightning at Typhon, a serpent spitting fire and smoke from 100 heads, and buries him so deep under the earth that volcanoes are still his angry breath thousands of years later. Apollo arrows Python at Delphi so prophecy itself can drink from that sacred spring. Cadmus slays a serpent sacred to Ares, sows its teeth, and fully armed warriors spring up like a nightmare harvest. Talk about a city literally born from blood and guts. And Heracles. Poor guy learns the hard way that brute strength isn't enough against the Hydra. Chop one head, 2 more hiss back at you. Only when his nephew sears the stumps with fire does the monster finally die. Greece never lets you forget the cost. Sweat, terror, and one clever trick when muscle fails. Even the Hittites in Anatolia, stuck between endless steppe and dark forests, tell a story that rips your heart out. Their storm god loses to Iluyanka. The serpent steals his eyes and heart. Blind and gutted, the god claws his way back, tricks the monster into a feast, binds it, slays it, but has to sacrifice his own son, who married into the serpent's family. That's not a victory song. That's a gut punch reminding everyone that order always demands a price. And sometimes the second fight is won only when gods and mortals pull the same rope. Egypt turns the whole thing into a nightly ritual that gave me goosebumps the first time I understood it. Every single night, the sunboat sails the black river of the underworld while priests far away spit on wax figures of Apep, stab them, burn them, grind the ashes to dust, just so dawn can crawl back into the sky. No single battle ever finishes the job. Every sunrise is a fresh victory. Every season has its own serpent. Every night its own black river. And the people work, pray, and retell the story so the grain can be planted with steady hands. That's honesty right there. The fight never really ends. Look closer and the pattern is stunning. Same serpent, same multi-headed nightmare living in water, hoarding what should flow. Same champion armed with storm tools, thunder, lightning, or a spear that crackles like both, freeing rivers, springs, skies. The payoff isn't a trophy head on a wall. It's rain drumming on parched fields and people shouting for joy because life just won another round. Neighbors taught neighbors. Tribes carried songs like precious seeds. Long before ships ever stitched the Mediterranean to the Indus, people were swapping copper, tin, wool, grain, and right alongside all that, the names of gods and the exact shape of the monster that had to die so the world could keep turning. A good story outruns any caravan. Hear once about a hero spearing a serpent in a mountain pass, and suddenly every river bursting from limestone after spring rains looks exactly like the tale coming true before your eyes. And these fights weren't just weather reports. They were leadership 101. Want the throne? Prove you've slain or bound a dragon. Kings in Mesopotamia sliced canals through the silt and bragged they were gifts from Marduk. Pharaohs kept temples gleaming, calendars perfect, granaries full, all to show they still had Apep on a leash. Fail and famine, bandits, despair win. The hero isn't some lone cowboy. He's the blueprint for good government. But here's what always gets me emotional. These stories shrink down small enough for any of us to carry. That monster, it can be sickness, heartbreak, the fear that wakes you at 3 a.m. The hero, a parent who won't quit, an old woman who knows exactly when to heat the iron, neighbours roping the problem together and pulling with everything they've got. Myths don't live because priests drone them. They live because we see ourselves in them. There's always a river to free, always a wound that won't close until someone finds the right fire. The old world never stopped telling the tale. Cities crumbled, languages changed, but the story marched on. Perseus swoops in on winged sandals, turns a sea monster to stone with a mirrored shield, and saves a princess chained to a rock. Jason lulls a sleepless serpent with a song and a little herbal help, snags the golden fleece, and sails home. Same chord, new notes. The serpent guards what we need, and the hero finds the one trick that works. Steel or lullaby, doesn't matter. Then lift your eyes north, where the wind tastes like ice, and sagas grew hard as iron among fjords and endless winters. The pattern darkens, but never breaks. One day, the serpent is the Midgard serpent, coiled so tight around the world, even the gods flinch. Another day, it's a dwarf twisted into dragon shape, sleeping on a hoard out on the lonely heath. The slayer, a boy trained by a wandering smith who digs a trench, lies in wait, and rams a sword up through the soft belly as the monster crawls overhead. Same bones, different frost. The monster always sits on what the world desperately needs: water, peace, or hard-earned wealth. And the hero always pays in blood and pain to set it free again. Those northern tales weren't bedtime fluff to hush kids to sleep. They were proof shouted across long halls and warnings carved into runestones. Proof that the unbeatable can be beaten. Warning that nothing stays beaten unless you keep watch. The drought dragon becomes the flood dragon. The spring guardian becomes the plague in the sky. Same remedy every time. A champion with the right tool, friends who know their part, and the stubborn patience to finish the job. And the deepest chord tying every single story together. Almost nobody wins alone. Even when a god hurls the killing thunder, somebody forged the bolt. Even when the sword slides home, somebody held the torch to sear the neck that keeps growing back. A goddess whispers the plan, a priest keeps the night vigil, a friend stands ready with fire. The monster is huge. The answer is always a fellowship. That's why these stories still grab us by the heart thousands of years later, because courage without a hand to hold is only half the victory. Are you feeling that fire in your chest yet? Because the dragon is just getting warmed up. Hang on tight, because here's the part that always makes my eyes sting and my heart pound. The hero almost never, ever wins alone. Picture it. Even when a god hurls a thunderbolt that splits the sky, somebody down in the forge hammered that bolt white hot. Even when a champion swings the killing sword, somebody, maybe a terrified kid, maybe a loyal friend, is holding the blazing torch to sear the neck so the wound can't grow back. A goddess leans in and whispers, the one plan that will work. A priest stands watch all night, voice raw from chanting the binding words. A buddy plants his feet and says, I've got the fire, you swing. The monster is huge, the night is black, and the only thing bigger than the dragon is the circle of hands that refuses to let go of each other. That's the secret fire in every single one of these stories, and it's why they still make us cry 5,000 years later. Real courage isn't a lone wolf howling. It's a fellowship locked shoulder to shoulder shouting, not on our watch. That's why these tales were told around cooking fires in tiny villages and sung in golden courts alike. They don't just praise the guy with the sword, they praise every single hand in the chain that made the sword matter. By the time writing crawled across the world and empires started stacking bricks higher than mountains, this pattern was already ancient, already carved into the bones of who we are, and it never stopped marching forward. It poured itself into saints galloping on white horses, into knights flashing bright mail under banners, into poems where dragons actually talk, and songs where whole towns burn if the hero blinks. But at the very first telling, around some frightened campfire when the stars felt too close, it was the simplest, most human cry in the world. Water should run where it's supposed to run. The sun should rise tomorrow. The seed should dare to sprout. Anything that coils around those things and squeezes has to be met head on. The hero steps out into the dark. Thunder rolls like the heartbeat of the planet. And somehow, against all odds, order comes back for one more season. Tell me that doesn't give you chills. Now, if you want to know where the dragon story turns gentle and majestic and absolutely breathtaking, come with me across the mountains to China, way back before writing, before kings, before anybody dared call themselves civilized. Imagine tiny villages hugging the yellow river, people shaping jade with nothing but patience and river stones, staring up at storm clouds praying for rain. Archaeologists digging in the northeast still pull up these little jade carvings, curved like the letter C, heads lifted high, tails tucked in tight. Scholars call them pig dragons because the snouts are round and cute. But look closer, those curves, those etched scales, they're something far older, far wilder, far holier. 5,000 years ago, somebody buried these with the same reverence we bury grandparents, because the dragon was already sacred, already tied to whether the living ate and the dead rested easy. The moment Chinese writing is born, scratched on oracle bones and bronze cauldrons, the very first character for dragon is a long, coiling body that looks ready to leap off the metal. Scribes carved it right next to kings' names, next to harvest tallies, next to how many oxen got sacrificed, because the dragon was already the pulse of everything. You see masks, spirals, farmers glancing up from the rice paddy and instantly knowing exactly what beast was dancing through the clouds. And what a beast! Antlers like a stag, eagle claws, catfish whiskers, carp scales, a roaring mane, every single strongest part of every animal stitched together into one impossible creature that belongs to river, mountain, and sky all at once. In China, the dragon isn't a villain, it's the lord of water. It rises on thunder, coils inside storm clouds, sleeps in lakes and the deepest sea. When dragons move, the heavens open and the world drinks. A good year, that's the year the dragons are happy. Out of that one electric truth grew an entire civilization's heartbeat of worship and rule. Every single river bend, every lake, every stretch of coast had its own dragon king, and people treated him like the most important neighbor you'll ever have. Magistrates burned incense until the smoke stung their eyes, begging for rain when the earth cracked like old pottery. Farmers paraded dragon banners through dusty streets, banging drums that sounded like the sky itself cracking open. When drought dragged on, the local official would fast until his ribs showed, sleep on straw like the poorest farmer, then lead everybody to the water's edge for a rite that said, "We're still listening." And when typhoons tore fishing boats apart, wives and mothers climbed temple steps at night, carrying lanterns that bobbed like fireflies, pleading, "Please calm the sea, great king. Bring our men home." This wasn't some side hobby of religion. This was the spine of life in a country built on rice and river silt. Then the imperial court took that same dragon and lifted it all the way to heaven. Emperors declared their right to rule came straight from the sky. They called it the mandate of heaven. And to prove it, they sat on a throne carved with dragons, wore robes when 9 dragons climbed through embroidered waves, and mountains chasing a flaming pearl that nobody has ever fully explained. Some say the pearl is thunder, some say the moon, some say perfect wisdom, But every painter knew the real point. The dragon chases harmony, and the emperor better chase it too. Only the emperor got 5-clawed dragons. 5 claws, people. Princes got 4, nobles got 3, and everybody else knew exactly where they stood in the pecking order by counting claws. Step into the Forbidden City today, and you are drowning in dragons. 9 glazed dragons on every wall, each one with its own personality. Bridges carried on the backs of stone turtles and Bixie, little dragon sons. A single marble ramp with over 1,000 scales carved so deep you want to reach out and touch them. Even the roof lines have little dragon beasts biting the clouds to keep fire spirits away. You literally lived under dragons, and every glance screamed the same message. The emperor rules because the dragons say yes, and if flood or famine stalks the land year after year, the dragons have turned their faces away. Myths poured straight into that royal language like rivers into the sea. Everybody grew up hearing how you, the Great, saved the world from a flood that lasted years. He didn't dam the waters, he studied them, cut new channels with the help of a turtle spirit and dragons who hauled mountains of earth in their claws. The waters finally dropped. Villages came back. Fields turned green. And a dynasty was born. Or the story of the Yellow Emperor, who, at the moment of death, turned into a dragon and rose into the storm. Not bragging about scales, just saying a true founder's spirit belongs with thunder and cloud forever. Gentler tales too. A farmer named Liu Dongfu, who learned the dragon's secret language through nothing but an honest heart. A village turtle that lived so long and grew so wise, it finally sprouted wings and became a dragon. The lesson never changed. Dragons love whoever lines up with the right order of things. Look up at night and the dragon owns the sky too. The azure dragon of the east stands guard with the white tiger, vermilion bird, and black tortoise. Springtime wood, new green shoots pushing through soil, that's his season. Astronomers mapped his body across whole constellations. Poets didn't even have to try. A warm spring breeze, that's a dragon stretching. A sudden storm on a perfect day, a dragon rolling over in his sleep. This dragon doesn't burn villages. He brings the rain that keeps them alive. Walk through any market and you'll see him writhing across silk scrolls, jaws wide, whiskers streaming, eyes locked on that mysterious pearl. One master painted 9 dragons so alive, the paper looks ready to tear from their weight. Blue and white porcelain has dragons chasing each other through waves and clouds like they're playing tag with the weather. Roof beams end in dragon heads. Bridge railings curl into dragon tails. Temple bells carry tiny dragons on top so every chime roars across the valley. And the festivals, oh my gosh, the festivals. First moon of the year, entire towns explode into motion as teams of men hoist a 100-foot dragon of silk and bamboo through the streets. Lanterns glow in its belly like captured stars. The head snaps and dives. Drums thunder so loud you feel it in your chest. Kids scream and dart under its jaws, while grandpas stand with arms folded, eyes shining, remembering every new year they've ever lived. 5th month, dragon boat races slice the rivers. Long, narrow boats painted with scales. Carved dragon heads biting the water. Oars flashing like lightning while drums shout the old prayer. Bring rain when we need it. Hold back the flood when we don't. There are even stories about the dragon's 9 sons, each with his own personality and job. One loves carrying heavy loads. so he squats under stone tablets like a turtle with attitude. One perches on roof ridges, watching for fire. One loves music and becomes bell handles, so every ring is a roar. One bears fangs on sword hilts and door knockers to scare thieves silly. The lists change from valley to valley, but the message is pure joy. Carve the right sun in the right spot, and you're asking the universe for exactly the help you need. Even the philosophers couldn't leave the dragon alone. The 5 phases guys put him in charge of springtime growth. Confucians measured rulers against him. A good emperor is a dragon who keeps cloud and rain balanced. A tyrant is a dragon thrashing his tail and drowning the world at midnight. Taoist masters told stories of old hermits who lived so light and true that dragons offered them rides through thunderstorms, like it was the most natural thing ever. The image was so powerful that when Western travelers finally laid eyes on those robes and palace walls, they just started calling the whole country the land of dragons. The symbol jumped onto flags, coins, treaties. Everybody knew what it meant. Can you feel it? In China, the dragon isn't something you slay. It's the breath of life itself, the heartbeat of water and rule and hope. And it's still dancing through every festival, every rooftop, every prayer for rain that anybody whispers when the fields start to crack. Tell me your heart isn't racing right now, because we haven't even hit the rest of Asia yet. And the dragon is just getting warmed up. Oh my gosh, can you feel the electricity in the air? Because right here, the dragon stops being just a sacred creature and turns into a full-blown political firestorm. In the crumbling last dynasties, when emperors were losing their grip, rebels looked at those imperial, 5-clawed dragons and said, "Not today." They hoisted completely different beasts on their banners, tigers, phoenixes, anything but the dragon, because that scaly symbol had become the face of the old order they were ready to tear down. And when the empire finally shattered and a brand new republic rose from the smoke, guess what happened? The dragon got kicked off the national flag. But nobody could rip it out of the festivals. The porcelain, the rooftops, the New Year parades, the village prayers. You try pulling a root that's been growing for 5,000 years. Good luck. It just laughs and keeps blooming. Now stand back and put the Chinese dragon right next to its Western cousin. And holy cow, the differences hit you like summer thunder. One look and you know everything about the lands that dreamed them. The Chinese dragon doesn't hoard gold. Are you kidding? It doesn't kidnap princesses. It almost never breathes fire. It's long, elegant, wingless, and yet it soars higher than any eagle. It brings life-giving rain, commands rivers to behave, and every farmer on a cracked field falls to his knees whispering, "Thank you." Its patron, emblem, ancestor, all rolled into one shimmering coil. The emperor stitches it on his robe to scream, "Heaven chose me." The village mason chisels it under a tiny bridge so the creek won't jump its banks and drown the rice. One single image carrying an entire civilization's heartbeat about water, rule, and raw hope. How beautiful is that? And the dragon never flies alone. Look at any scroll, any palace wall, and right there beside him blazes the phoenix, graceful, fiery, reborn from its own ashes. Dragon for the emperor, phoenix for the empress, yang and yin locked in perfect dance. Palace builders carved them in pairs so every visitor would feel the message without a single word. Harmony at the top, means harmony all the way down to the poorest farm. Rains on time, harvests fat, festivals exploding with colour. That's the promise. The old terror of flood and drought is still hiding under the paint, but now it's tamed into drums and lanterns and dragon boats slicing the river. That's why China clutched the dragon so tight for millennia, because this isn't just a monster or a pet. It's the living bridge between heaven and earth. It ties the storm clouds to the rice in your bowl. It ties a ruler's honesty to whether kids go to bed hungry. It carries the trembling prayer of a farmer at sunrise and the blazing pride of a court that believes the sky itself is watching. And yeah, books forget to say this, but it's gorgeous. Coiled in cloud, jaws open to that mysterious pearl, claws flexed, whiskers streaming in the wind. One look and you believe the world is alive and ordered and worth every drop of sweat. But hold on, because the second you step outside China, the dragon explodes into a whole wild family tree. From the Himalayas to the Pacific, every river bend, every cave, every underwater palace has its own branch, and they're all holding water and fortune in their coils. Some shelter you like wise old uncles, some demand ritual, offerings, or cold steel. Peoples who live by monsoon and tide learn to speak dragon fluently, with incense, songs, and sometimes a very sharp sword. Start in India and your heart skips a beat, because here the serpent beings are called nagas, snake, spirit, king of the deep, all at once. In the Mahabharata, Taksaka drops a king with one venomous strike and sparks a fire altar so huge it supposedly swallows entire serpent clans. Then there's Kaliya poisoning the Yamuna until teenage Krishna dives in, dances on the snake's 1,000 hoods like it's a stage, and forces him to pack up and leave so cows and kids can drink again. But the greatest Naga of all, Shesa, Ananta, the Endless One, coiled beneath the universe holding everything on his 1,000 hoods while Vishnu naps between creations. And when gods and demons decide to churn the ocean of milk for immortality, who do they use as the rope? Vasuki, the world serpent, yanked back and forth until mountains sink and the cosmos itself shakes. These aren't random bedtime stories. They're the heartbeat of a land that watches rivers roar down from Himalayan snow and knows water can bless or bury you in a single season. Yet Nagas aren't always enemies. In Bengal, they still pray to Manasa, the serpent goddess who guards against snakebite and makes fields burst green and cradles full. When the Buddha sat freshly awakened under the Bodhi tree and a storm roared in, who rose from the lake? Mukalinda, the Naga king, spreading his giant hoods like a living umbrella to shield the enlightened one from wind and rain. Later tales say Naga kings guard sacred scriptures in crystal palaces under the waves and only hand them over when a teacher is pure enough. Here, the serpent isn't something you kill. It's a keeper of wisdom who decides when you're ready. From India, those serpent kings hitched rides with merchants, monks and stone carvers and spread everywhere. Run your hand along a Khmer causeway, Angkor Wat, and you're touching Naga bodies with 7 or 9 heads fanned like deadly flowers. The whole city feels like a giant model of the cosmic ocean being churned. Khmer origin legends say, a kingdom was born when an Indian prince married a Naga princess, and her father literally drank the floodwaters, so dry land could appear. Talk about the ultimate father-in-law sacrifice. That single image screams how Southeast Asia saw kingship. A real ruler makes peace with the powers of water. Follow the Mekong and the Naga becomes your neighbor. Laos and Thailand still keep little riverside shrines where the current twists and looks alive. Dragon boat races thunder down muddy water under prow eyes painted huge and fierce. In northeast Thailand, when the rainy season ends, people gather at night to watch glowing red fireballs rise from the river. Naga lights, proof the river lords are stirring. Temple gates open like giant fanged mouths. Stair railings coil like living serpents guarding every step. Monks still tell the story of a Naga who took human form to ask for ordination. And to this day, novices wear serpent-patterned robes their first days to honor that visitor from the deep. Head east, and the dragon literally becomes the ancestor of an entire nation. Vietnam sings how Dragon Lord Lac Long Quan married mountain fairy O Ko, and she laid 100 eggs. 50 children followed Mom to the highlands. 50 followed Dad to the sea. Vietnam herself born from that sacred split. Dynasties name capitals after dragons. Thang Long, Rising Dragon, is still Hanoi's heartbeat. Roof tiles, thrones, village shrines. Everywhere you look, a gentle-faced dragon jaws open to a flaming pearl. Court rules counted claws, like China. But farmers never let go. To them, the dragon is still the reason rivers swell and rice turns gold, sail south through the islands, and the serpent family keeps branching. Java and Bali carve Basuki, and Antaboga bracing the earth under volcanoes. Temple stairs climb between Naga bodies, flaring hoods like stone fans. Festival dancers retell the churning of the ocean so the rains remember to come. In the Philippines, the Bakunawa is a moon-eating sea serpent. Every eclipse, villagers bang pots and shout to scare him off, and you can feel that terror in your bones. Borneo's Dayak carve the ferocious Aso, half serpent, half hound, on war shields. These are water and wood dragons, guardians of the liminal, the in-between. Climb into the Himalayas, and the dragon turns into thunder itself. Bhutan proudly calls itself Druk Yul, land of the thunder dragon, and slaps a white, jewel-clawed beast on its flag. Monastery walls roar with the same creature. When lightning forks and the sky answers back, that's the dragon speaking. Tibet paints Nagas under temple floors, guardians of water and hidden treasure, and monks leave offerings, so springs stay sweet and beams don't rot. Korea takes the dragon and makes him a story of hope that still makes me tear up. The Imuji is a giant serpent who dreams of becoming a true dragon. If it endures 1,000 years of patience and snatches the luminous pearl that falls from heaven, bam! It ascends in a storm of light and becomes a Yong, lord of rain and rivers. That idea, virtue and perseverance can literally lift you into the sky, is carved into every Joseon Palace pond, every bridge shaped like a dragon's back, every royal robe where claw, count still mattered. Court kept the dignity, farmers kept the hope, and finally Japan, oh Japan, where the dragon is Ryu or Tatsu, a sleek cousin of the Chinese long with its own island soul. Wingless yet soaring, it calls rain for the rice paddies, guards sacred springs, crouches as bronze fountains spout so worshippers can rinse hands and mouth before stepping into the presence of gods. Old tales whisper of Ryujin's undersea palace glittering with tide jewels that command the oceans themselves. A humble fisherman named Urashima Taro once rode down to that palace, married the sea god's daughter, and came back to find centuries had passed on the surface. Time runs different under the waves. and that heartbreak still echoes in every Japanese story about love and longing. Can you feel the salt on your skin yet? Because the dragon has carried us across half the world, and every single culture wrapped its deepest hopes and fears around those shining coils. The journey isn't over. We still have the West waiting with fire and wings. But right now, standing in the monsoon rain with a billion voices singing to the same serpent family, don't you just want to throw your head back and roar with them? Oh my God, close your eyes for a second and feel the salt spray on your face. Because when poor Urashima Taro finally rose back to shore after 3 perfect days in Ryujin's undersea palace, the village is gone, the trees are giants, his own mother's grave is overgrown with moss, and centuries have slammed past while he was kissing a dragon princess. Time itself is crueler than any monster, and that single heartbreaking moment echoes in every Japanese story about love that crosses the boundary between worlds. Can you even imagine the tears? But sometimes the dragon plants itself right in the hero's road and demands a fight. Here comes Stormborn Susanoo, wild, exiled, furious, riding the wind like he owns it. He finds an old couple sobbing beside a river because an 8-headed serpent is coming back to devour their last daughter. Susanoo doesn't even blink. He brews 8 giant vats of sake so strong it could knock out a mountain, sets them out like party favors, and when that drunken 8-headed horror finally collapses in a snoring heap, Susanoo hacks it to pieces, and inside the tail, a sword so perfect it hums in his hand, later named Kusanagi, one of the 3 sacred treasures that still sits in the imperial regalia today. That's Japan, telling the same ancient story with a samurai twist. Brains and planning beat brute force every time, and from the corpse of a monster can come the blade that founds an entire dynasty. Are you pumping your fist yet? Buddhism swoops in like a gentle wind and ties every single one of these island and peninsula tales together with golden thread. Monks walking the Silk Road from India carried the Naga in their hearts, guardian, benefactor, keeper of rainy secrets. Suddenly, every temple from Nara to Seoul has legends of serpents who shield sacred ground, who bring rain when the rice is dying, who glare at any monk foolish enough to start building without asking permission first. When a pagoda crashes in an earthquake, the chronicles don't just blame bad carpentry. They say the Naga underneath got angry and needed offerings, new foundation stones, songs, lanterns, the works. Practical engineering and pure myth hold hands and bow to each other, because a wise builder fixes the problem and then thanks the spirit who let him. Isn't that beautiful? Step back, just a little, and the pattern hits you like monsoon rain. Every Asian dragon, every Naga, is chained to water, to the green pulse of the fields, to the heartbeat of the year itself. They are the face we give to the monsoon, to the river that can feed you or bury you, to the lightning that jumps from cloud to mountain peak, to the spring that never fails. Kings stitched them onto robes because a ruler who couldn't keep the canals flowing and the granaries full was no ruler at all. Villages carved them on gateposts because one family's dinner depended on the river staying sweet. When the serpent turns nasty, a hero or saint leaps up. When it protects, the wise bring rice and incense and keep their promises. You can still taste this in everyday life, and it gives me goosebumps. Picture a Korean kid at New Year ducking under a paper dragon that snaps and dives like it's alive, learning before he can read that the sea can be a friend if you bow first. Picture dragon boat rowers pulling in perfect rhythm, while a monk rings a bronze bell shaped like a dragon handle, praying for fair winds and fat rice. Picture a Balinese stone carver chiseling scales at the foot of temple stairs, where villagers leave mangoes and ask the fever to leave their child. Picture a Shinto pilgrim in Japan cupping icy water from a dragon's mouth, rinsing away the dust of the world before tying a wish to a cedar branch. None of them need a textbook to understand. We share the planet with powers far bigger than us. We can make peace. But we better stay ready to fight when those powers forget their manners. Across this whole sweeping arc of Asia, these dragons feel like one endless river with 1,000 glittering bends. They don't hoard gold. They don't sit in caves, counting cups like miserly hermits. They are never trophies impaled on spears. They are neighbors, patrons, sometimes stern judges who make kings sweat. Builders triple-check their work. Farmers whisper thanks every dawn. And storytellers, brave enough to speak truth to power. The grandparents who first whispered these tales knew exactly what they were doing, handing their kids the survival manual for living next to water that can cradle you one day and rear up like a furious serpent the next. And then we sail west, and everything changes with a crack of thunder. When Greek poets said draken, they meant a serpent whose eyes never, ever close. The root of the word literally means the one who stares. These aren't friendly rainbringers. These are watchers, coiled around the things that matter most. Springs that feed entire cities, golden apples that shine like mini-suns. The legendary fleece every king would kill for. Step 1 foot closer, and those eyes snap open. Want the water? Want the treasure? Want the gods' favour? Then you'd better be ready to stare down a guardian who hasn't blinked in 1,000 years. Start at Delphi, ground zero for prophecy. And the story still makes my pulse race. Before Apollo's shining temple, the place belonged to Mother Earth herself, and her guardian was Python, a serpent so massive it owned the sacred spring. Apollo storms in, arrows singing, and slays the beast so his oracle can drink from that water. Older versions say he picked the fight. Later ones say Python had hunted his mother Leto. Either way, a new order slaughters the old, and even the name of the priestess, Pythia, means the one who rots, because victory always carries the smell of what it killed. Can you feel the weight of that? Head to Thebes, and the founding of a city is literally born from dragon's blood. Cadmus follows a cow, random, right, to pick a home site, sends men to a spring sacred to Ares, and, surprise, a serpent explodes out and slaughters them. Cadmus grabs a spear, wrestles the monster down, and rams steel through its jaws. Athena appears like, "Nice kill, now sow the teeth." Armed warriors spring from the dirt like nightmares, hack each other to pieces. Only 5 survive. And those 5 become the noble families who build Thebes. A city grown from dragon teeth. How metal is that? But Cadmus still owes years of service to Ares for the blood he spilled. Kill a dragon, found a city, but the debt never disappears. Then Heracles, poor tormented Heracles, meets the Hydra in the stinking marshes of Lerna, and this fight is pure nightmare fuel. Cut one head, 2 more hiss back at you. Strength alone is useless. Thank the gods he brought his nephew Iolaus, because the second Heracles lops a head off, Iolaus slams a torch on the stump and sears it shut. Cut, burn, burn. until the final immortal head gets crushed under a boulder. Heracles dips his arrows in the poison. Those same arrows will circle back years later on a shirt soaked in centaur lies and kill him. The Hydra isn't just a labor, it's a lesson carved in blood. Hit a problem wrong and it multiplies. And even victory leaves poison in your veins. Out west, the Hesperides guard golden apples with ladon coiled around the tree like living jewelry. No thief gets past those sleepless eyes. Heracles needs the fruit, and the myths argue over whether he kills Ladon outright or tricks Atlas into doing the dirty work. Either way, you don't mess with a dragon guardian without paying a price. Across the Black Sea, the golden fleece glows on a branch in Colchis, watched by a dragon that literally never sleeps. Jason can't fight it, no chance. So Medea, half in love, half sorceress, sings it to sleep with herbs and lullabies. Jason snatches the fleece and runs. The dragon lives, but the betrayal Medea will suffer later is its own kind of poison. Sometimes you win by the blade, sometimes by the song, but the price always finds you. Sea monsters, Ketos, rise when cities tick off the gods. Andromeda chained to a rock for her mother's big mouth. Perseus swooping in with Medusa's head and turning the beast to stone. Hesione about to be lunch for Poseidon's wrath until Heracles yanks her from the jaws. Offend the sea and the serpent comes knocking. And then Typhon, sweet mercy, Typhon. 100 roaring heads, fire and storm pouring from every mouth. The ultimate challenge to Zeus himself. Lightning crashes, the sky splits. Zeus buries the monster under a mountain, and to this day, Mount Etna belches smoke because Typhon is still breathing down there, dreaming of revenge. The ground itself remembers that some victories are never completely quiet. Even in Homer's Iliad, the word drakon just means snake. But soldiers see one devour 9 birds plus the mother, 10 total. And the seer calmly says, 10 years of war, guys. Omens wrapped in scales. From the very beginning, the Greek dragon is the watcher, the price, the guardian you have to outwit or outfight if you want anything worth having. And every single time, the story whispers the same chilling truth. Kill it, trick it, lull it, whatever you do. The dragon never really dies without leaving its mark on you. Are you ready to cross over to the fire-breathing, gold-hoarding West now? Because the dragon is about to grow wings, and the real storm is just beginning. Oh, hang on to something, because we're still in that sun-drenched Greek and Roman world where the dragon hasn't grown wings yet. But every single thing we love about it is already staring us down. Shields flash with serpents coiled and ready to strike. One blink and you're dead. City walls are nicknamed Dragon's Back because they curve like liver muscle. The line between a real snake in the grass and the legend that will eat a world is paper thin. And that's exactly how they liked it. Watchfulness that never sleeps. Venom that drops heroes in their tracks. Heads that sprout faster than you can scream. A love affair with water. A sacred duty to guard springs and golden fruit and fleeces worth dying for. It's all right there. The later age that paints wings and fire-breathing fury is just taking clay the Greeks and Romans already moulded and giving it a final terrifying polish. Can you feel the goosebumps? Rome didn't sit around inventing brand new dragon tales. They were too busy conquering the world for that. But they snatched every Greek story, dusted it with legionary grit, and made it march in formation. Latin writers casually dropped the word Draco for monsters big enough to wrestle elephants in Africa. or stop entire Indian rivers just by drinking. Pliny the Elder, yes, the guy who died watching Vesuvius blow, swears a dragon will coil around an elephant until both collapse dead in the dust. Wild? Absolutely. But Romans wrote it down like they were cataloguing lions or crocodiles. Dangerous, sure, but real enough to put in a book. And then comes the moment that still makes my soldier heart pound. Picture the frozen Danube frontier. Roman legions clash with Dacian warriors charging under banners that look alive. A bronze dragon head with jaws wide open gulps the wind. A long silk tail streams behind like a screaming comet. And when the cavalry thunders forward, the whole thing ripples and howls, a battle cry with no human throat. The Romans hear that sound and basically go, "We need that." Within years, every crack Roman cavalry unit is flying the Draco standard. Emperors stamp it on coins, law codes name elite troops Draconari, and late Roman battle art shows that windsock dragons snarling across the field, like terror itself made fabric. It's not guarding a spring anymore. It's marking exactly where Rome plants its spear and dares the world to move. Tell me, that's not the coolest war toy ever invented. And the stories? Virgil gives us one of the most gut-wrenching scenes in all literature. Troy is doomed, the wooden horse sits outside the gates, and the priest Laocoon is screaming, "Burn it! It's a trick!" Next thing you know, two enormous sea serpents surge from the waves, sent by the gods who want Troy gone, coil around Laocoon and his two little boys, and crush them to death right in front of the horrified city. That sculpture, you've seen the photos, still makes people gasp 2,000 years later. The agony in the father's face, the tiny bodies vanishing in those scaly loops. It's not a fire-breathing monster, it's divine punishment wearing serpent skin, exactly what every Greek and Roman expected from the deep. Greek vases and Roman reliefs lock the image forever. Black figure pottery shows Apollo standing triumphant over Python's writhing corpse beside the tiny shrine. Red figure craters capture Heracles wrestling the Hydra, while Iolaus jams the torch in. You can almost smell the burning flesh. One painted cup even shows Jason, yes, Jason, being vomited out of the Colchian dragon's mouth after grabbing the fleece. Talk about your dramatic exit. Sculptors start putting slain dragons at every hero's feet like trophies, and the pattern never changes. Long, sinuous bodies, crested heads, eyes that burn even in stone, coils wrapped around sacred trees and springs. The rules are carved in marble. A draken is a guardian of the rare and holy, tied to water and earth, strangler not flamethrower, loyal to the old gods of watchfulness. Kill it and your city rises, but the spring you drink from will always taste a little of its blood. Rome hands down one last gift that changes everything for the future. They make dragons plausible. Between the Draco standards, howling on the battlefield, and naturalists writing about river-stopping serpents like it's just another Tuesday, later ages open a Pliny, or look at a Trajan's column relief and think, wait, these things might actually exist out there on the edges of the map. That seed of maybe refuses to die. It slips into medieval bestiaries, right alongside lions and unicorns, into sermons where priests call the devil a serpent, but also swear there's a real one living in the next valley. The classical world hands us the stories and the chilling conviction that dragons belong on actual maps. So when Christianity sweeps in, the dragon is already waiting. Half myth, half nightmare, totally ready to grow wings. And grow wings it does. Sail north with me now, leave the sunny Mediterranean behind, and steer into water so cold it bites. Nights stretch forever, trees groan like they're alive, and the serpent changes into something darker, hungrier, patient as winter itself. It curls through the roots of Yggdrasil, the world ash. It sleeps on top of ancient grave mounds. It learns to speak with a voice like grinding ice. And most terrifying of all, it falls in love with gold. Not spending it, not sharing it, just the weight, the gleam, the cold shine in an empty hall when everyone else is dead. Norse poets wrap a serpent around the entire planet and name it Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent, Loki's kid, thrown into the sea by Odin himself. It grows until its mouth meets its own tail, and fishermen sometimes hook it by accident and feel the whole ocean tug back. One song still makes my blood freeze. Thor goes fishing with the giant Hymir, baits the hook with an entire ox head, rows past the edge of the world, and the line goes taut. The boat heels, planks splinter under Thor's feet. The sky goes black, and for one heart-stopping second, the Midgard serpent breaks the surface. Scales like shattered shields, eyes older than gods. Thor hefts Mjolnir, lightning crackles, and Hymir, terrified, cuts the line. The serpent sinks, the world breathes again, and the story whispers. Some things are too big to fight before their time. Do you feel that shiver? Down at the roots of the world tree, Norse Nidhugger. Name tastes like poison, doesn't it? Chewing the root that holds everything together while a squirrel scurries up and down the trunk. Trading insults between the serpent and a giant eagle at the top. Deer nibble the bark. A dragon drinks from the spring of rivers. It's not a neat diagram. It's a poem about rot and renewal, about how every living thing feeds on death and has something gnawing at its foundations. Ignore it, and the whole tree, the whole world, crashes. Then the saga zooms in tight to one lonely barrow on a windy heath and gives us the darkest dragon story of them all. A dwarf named Andvari guards a hoard and a cursed ring in a river. Loki and Odin force him to hand it over as blood price for a murder. The victim was an otter who was secretly Andvari's brother, because nothing is ever simple. Andvari screams that the gold will kill everyone who touches it, and he's right. The treasure passes to a king named Hreidmar. Then his son Fafnir murders him for it, drags the hoard to a barren heath, and literally turns into a dragon. Scales, poisoned breath, sleepless eyes, the whole nightmare. Gold did that to him. The love of it twisted a man into a monster. Enter Sigurd, young, brave, doomed. His foster father Regin, Fafnir's own brother, sharpens a sword and whispers, "Kill the dragon, bring me the gold." Sigurd digs a pit on the path to the waterhole, lies in the mud with sword pointed up. And when that vast belly crawls overhead, stab. Blood pours like a red river. Fafnir, dying, actually talks, asks the boy's name, laughs bitterly, warns that the gold will murder everyone Sigurd loves. Sigurd tastes the dragon blood. Suddenly he understands birdsong. And the birds scream, "Regan's going to kill you in your sleep." Sigurd spins, beheads the traitor, loads the cursed treasure on horses, and rides straight into legend and heartbreak. The dragon is dead, but the curse just changed riders. Later generations retell the same bones with new names. Siegfried bathes in the blood and becomes nearly invincible, except for that one spot where a linden leaf stuck to his back. Guess where the final spear finds him? And across the North Sea, the Old English Beowulf saves the dragon for last, the final, terrible test of a king who's already fought sea hags and monsters in burning lakes. He's old now, grey in the beard, but when a thief steals one cup from a 2,000-year-old hoard, the dragon wakes furious and burns half the kingdom in revenge. Beowulf marches out with 12 men, 11 run. Only young Wiglaf stays loyal. Together, old king and young warrior, they face a firestorm. Shield melts, sword shatters. Beowulf takes a mortal wound but drives a dagger into the dragon's throat. The beast dies, the hoard is revealed, and Beowulf sits against the cave wall, blood pooling, smiling because he won the treasure for his people, then dies. The dragon is the final measure of a king, and the price is everything. Are you crying yet? Because I always am when the pyre lights and the curse rides on into the next story. The North just gave the dragon wings, fire, and a broken heart of pure gold, and we have never recovered. Oh, sweet mercy, hold me, because we are standing at the end of the greatest hero the North ever sang about, and my heart is already breaking. Decades have rolled by like winter storms since young Beowulf swam through black icy water to rip Grendel apart in Heorot, and then dove deeper still to cut the heart out of Grendel's mother in her underwater hell cave. He came home a legend, took the throne, ruled wisely and well for 50 winters, and now the man is old, greybeard, aching joints, but still the same fire in his eyes. And somewhere on a lonely headland, sealed inside a stone barrow with the bones of forgotten kings, sleeps an ancient hoard. Cups, rings, swords, all glowing like frozen fire. One night, a desperate thief slips in, steals a single jeweled cup, and the dragon wakes. Can you feel that moment? One cup missing, and the beast feels the empty place like a stab wound. 300 years it slept on that gold, and now it rises roaring, wings blotting out the moon, and the countryside burns. Farms, halls, children, everything turns to ash under that firestorm. Beowulf hears the screams, buckles on armor that suddenly feels too heavy, gathers his best warriors, and marches to the barrow like a man walking to his own funeral. At the mouth of the cave, his hand-picked thanes, men who swore blood oaths, see the fire coming and their courage melts. They run, all but one. One young man named Wiglaf, heart pounding, knees shaking, plants his feet and shouts, "I was never afraid when the mead was flowing. I won't be afraid now." He charges in beside his king. The dragon explodes out like living thunder. Beowulf's shield turns to slag in his hands. His ancient sword, the one that never failed, shatters against scales. Flames lick his armor, sear his flesh. Wiglaf, God bless that boy, finds the soft spot under the wing and rams his blade home. Beowulf, half dead already, draws a dagger and drives it through the dragon's throat. The fire dies with a hiss. The cave fills with the quiet music of piled gold ringing like bells, and Beowulf slumps against the stone wall, blood bubbling on his lips. He asks to see the treasure one last time, smiles through the pain, and whispers thanks to God that he could win it for his people. He slips his golden collar, the same one he wore the night he killed Grendel, over Wiglaf's neck, speaks his last words, and dies with smoke still curling in the air, and coins glinting on the wall like tears. They build his funeral pyre on a cliff where the sea roars forever, bury the hoard with him so no new curse can wake, and a woman, some say his queen, some say a prophetess, sings a dirge that breaks every heart. More wars are coming, enemies across the water, the Geats will fall. The poem ends with the simplest, most devastating line. The dragon lay there dead by the stone wall, the one who had guarded the hoard for winters without number. And what hits you like a hammer is not just the fight, it's the truth that gold kept in the dark grows its own poisonous life and calls something scaled and sleepless to guard it. That barrow is a wound in the land itself, drawing brave men and dooming them, asking for a king to empty it and pay with his life. Every time I read it, I'm sobbing by the end. But the North loved smaller worms too, the kind that crawl out of wells and into ballads that still make kids hide under blankets. Take the lambton worm. My skin crawls just saying it. A cocky young lord skips Sunday mass to fish, hooks something pale and slimy with eyes that look straight into his soul, and in a panic flings it down a well. Off he goes to the Crusades, forgetting the whole thing. Years later, he rides home a hero, and the countryside is terrorised by a monster the size of a hill. It coils around Lambton Castle like a living belt, swallows cattle whole, lashes stone walls to rubble with one sweep of its tail. The young lord, now sick with guilt, visits a wise woman who tells him to cover his armour in razor-sharp blades and fight in the river so the current carries the pieces away. He does it. The worm wraps around him, slices itself to bloody ribbons on every spike, and dies. Victory. Right. Except he had sworn to kill the first living thing he saw afterward to break the curse. His own father runs out overjoyed to greet him, and the son can't do it. From that day, the Lambton line is cursed. 9 generations of tragedy. 1 moment of mercy. A lifetime of sorrow. Tell me, that doesn't chill you to the bone? Across the border, the Linton worm haunts a cave, devours livestock, poisons the air until a knight named Somerville forges a spear with a massive iron head, wraps it in pitch and hemp, lights it blazing, and rams burning death straight down the monster's throat. Smoke pours out. The worm bursts like an overfilled wineskin, and the countryside breathes again. Farther north, the great store worm coils across the sea, demanding a princess every week like some nightmare tax collector. A boy nobody believes in steals a boat, rows right into the gaping mouth, cuts out the liver, lights it with a coal he carried from home, and the beast thrashes so hard its dying teeth fall out and become the Orkney and Shetland Islands. Peat smoke, salt wind, desperate courage. That's the taste of these northern tales. And you see the dragon everywhere you look. Norwegian stave churches end their ridge beams in dragon heads biting the sky, as if the building itself remembers the world's serpent under the floorboards. Runestones twist the words inside serpent bodies, so the runes crawl like living things. Viking longships slice the fjords with snarling dragon prows, but Icelandic lore says, take the head off before you beach, or you'll offend the land spirits. War and respect in one breath. That's the northern soul. Gold is the heartbeat under every story. Hoards buried in bogs, hidden in barrows, offered to gods, or stashed in panic. Later generations dig up arm rings, bosses, cups black with peat, and instantly understand why tales grew of something scaled and sleepless guarding the shine. A dragon loves gold because gold never talks back, never changes sides, never asks why you're alone in the dark. It just gleams. The poets turned that cold truth into lore. The dragon is the final, hideous step of human greed. The tone sharpens as Christianity rolls in. In the oldest sagas, a dragon is just a fact. Grab a spade and a sword and deal with it. By Beowulf's time, it's the price of kingship. Sit on the hoard while your people burn, and you deserve what comes. In later ballads, the worm is sometimes a literal curse from a wronged witch or princess. Kill the beast, but you still have to lift the curse, or it eats your soul. The dragon becomes a mirror pointed straight at the heart. Out of these frozen tales come the pieces every later writer nails together. The earth-hiding dragon, the flying fire drake that burns a kingdom over one missing cup, the talking serpent whose words cut deeper than claws, the boy with a shovel and a sharp edge, the old king with a broken sword, the one loyal friend who refuses to run, the cliffside barrow pounded by winter waves, the ring that dooms every hand that wears it. You can almost smell the peat smoke and hear the sea roaring. These stories grew from people who buried their dead with treasure, who lost cattle to something moving in the dark, who saw what gold did to brothers and friends. They never forgot the old serpent either. Jörmungandr still waits in the deep for Ragnarök. Nidhöggr will rise from the roots when the world ends. Even Thor's final fight ends with the god killing the Midgard serpent and staggering 9 steps before the venom drops him. Some victories only buy time. Yet the tales that really dig their claws into our hearts are the ones with a man, a mound, and a bright blade against impossible odds. That's the dragon the Middle Ages will dress in wings and greed and send charging across Europe. The same creature that started as a sea serpent and a storm god's enemy, now ready to meet saints on horseback and knights in gleaming mail. The road from a god wrestling chaos in the deep to a soldier knee-deep in a river facing a local worm is straight as an arrow when you follow the northern wind. And when the church bells start ringing and the old gods fade to whispers, the dragon doesn't die, it just changes neighborhoods. It slithers from sacred springs to village squares, from pagan groves to church walls. And suddenly, priests are preaching about it, while painters slap it under saints' horses. And kids on feast days watch plays where a smoking, roaring monster gets lanced by a holy rider. In this new Christian world, the dragon grows claws of pure lesson, pride, greed, the poisonous breath of fear itself. It's still the old power, but now the church says, bow to a higher king or burn. And everybody starts with St. George, because his story blazed from the sands of the Middle East to the rainy fields of England like holy wildfire. The old records say he was a soldier martyred for the faith, but later generations, God loved them, gave him a snow-white horse, a lance that shines like judgment, and a whole terrified town. In the Golden Legend, the medieval bestseller that every grandma knew by heart, the scene is set near Selene. A dragon has claimed a swamp, poisoned the water, and the desperate people feed it. Sheep, then children, until the lot finally falls on the king's own daughter. She walks out in her wedding dress, to die while the city weeps behind locked doors. And then, oh then, George rides in like the answer to 1,000 prayers, makes the sign of the cross that burns the air itself, and the story is just getting started. Are you ready? Because the dragon is about to meet the age of faith, and nothing will ever be the same. Oh my soul, can you picture it? The moment the lance flashes, George charges like heaven itself is riding with him, and the spear bites true. The dragon, this nightmare that's been eating children, thrashes in agony, tail whipping the lake into a storm, wings beating the air like war drums. The princess, trembling but brave, throws her silk sash at George's shout. She loops it around the monster's neck, and I still get chills every time. The beast drops to its belly and follows her through the city gates like a whipped hound. The townspeople scream in disbelief, half terror, half joy. George raises a hand, calm as sunrise, and tells them, "Turn to God, now." And they do. Every single one falls to their knees. Only then, only when faith has won the real victory, does he finish the dragon with one quiet, merciful thrust. That's not just a fight, friends. That's a thunderclap of hope. Faith itself tames terror and sets the well free again. No wonder crusaders stitched his red cross on their tunics and marched under strange skies whispering, "He's riding with us tonight." No wonder English kings made his feast a national holiday, and every guild begged him to be their patron. Stand in front of any old Italian painting and you can feel the spear sliding home, the princess clutching the leash, the tiny faces peering from the city wall, eyes wide as saucers. It's theatre, it's theology, it's the whole Middle Ages shouting, "Courage looks like this." But George isn't the only saint who tangled with dragons and came out shining. Oh no. Saint Margaret of Antioch, sweet, fierce girl, gets thrown in prison for refusing to give up her faith. Guards beat her, drag her by the hair, and suddenly a dragon appears in her cell and swallows her whole. Can you imagine the darkness, the heat, the slime? But Margaret prays, lifts the tiny wooden cross she somehow still has, and that cross grows until it tears the dragon open from the inside. She steps out covered in glory, calm as morning, while the monster explodes behind her. Women in labour clutched her name like a lifeline for centuries, because if a teenage girl can burst a dragon from the inside with nothing but a cross and guts, then surely God will get them through the pain. Stone carvers went wild, timpana, fonts. Every church door suddenly has this tiny girl stepping out of a ripped open serpent, cross blazing like the sun. Then there's gentle Saint Martha on the banks of the Rhone, fishermen cursing because the Tarasque keeps ripping nets and dragging whole boats under, soldiers coming home in pieces. Martha walks out with nothing but holy water and a psalm on her lips. She sprinkles, she sings, and the monster, this mountain of scales and teeth, drops to its knees and lets her tie a simple cord around its neck. She leads it into town like a lost lamb. The terrified townsfolk grab clubs and stones and beat it to death in panic. When the dust settles, they fall at Martha's feet, begging forgiveness for killing what she had already tamed. And every summer in Tarascon, they still parade a giant wooden Tarasque on wheels, drummers pounding, kids laughing and screaming, a dragon killed by a hymn, not a sword, and the whole town remembers the shame and the miracle. Up on the Seine, Saint-Romain faces the Gargouille, a smoke-belching horror wrecking ships and blackening the sky. He takes one volunteer, walks to the riverbank, slips his priestly stole around its neck, and leads it back like a pony. The townspeople burn the body, but keep the head nailed above the door as a warning and a charm. Stonemasons hear the name Gargouille and run with it. Suddenly every cathedral in Europe has stone dragons vomiting rainwater off the roof, so the walls stay dry. The same mouth that once poisoned the air now spits clean water away from the saints. Tell me that's not the sweetest redemption you've ever heard. Across the sea in misty Celtic lands, the stories grow quieter, more haunting. St. Carantoc plants his altar stone in the middle of a village tormented by a dragon that scares cattle from the river. He celebrates Mass like it's Sunday morning. When he finishes, he picks up the stone, heavy as a horse, like it's a feather, walks to the water, holds out his stole, and the dragon bows its head and follows him like a penitent child. The local king is so awestruck, he donates land for a church on the spot. No battle, no blood, just order restored by the calm authority of faith. And towering over every saint stands the Archangel Michael, sword blazing, wings like sunrise, stomping the ancient serpent into the dirt exactly like Revelation promised. Painters give him scales under his heel, a claw sneaking toward the scales of justice. But Michael's foot never slips. Shrines to him perch on lonely mountaintops, where the wind howls and the clouds feel close enough to touch. Pilgrims climb those steps in fog and thin air just to kneel where heaven and earth feel like they kiss. And even if the dragon is only a tiny coil carved near his ankle, everybody knows exactly what it means. Evil loses, while Michael watches. People back then didn't file dragons next to unicorns and laugh them off as cute fairy tales. No way. Bestiaries listed them right between lions and elephants as the biggest, realest serpents alive. Isidore of Seville swore they loved caves and fled from crushed laurel. Try it if one ever shows up, folks. Crusaders brought home crocodile skins and hung them in churches like dragons slain in the Holy Land. Whale ribs washed ashore and became instant sea dragon skeletons mounted over doorways. Apothecaries sold fossil shark teeth as dragon tongues that cured poison, and desperate mothers wore them around their necks. Scholars today chuckle, but walk into a medieval coastal village with black water and reeds whispering at night, see a giant jawbone hanging over the church door, and tell me you wouldn't sleep better. Sermons turn the dragon into a walking, fire-breathing Sunday school lesson. Coils equals pride and envy. Breath equals slander and plague. Hoard, the rich man who lets the village starve while he counts coins. Stained glass windows showed it curled at the bottom of a well until a saint raised 2 fingers in blessing and the water ran sweet again. A diagram for living. Somebody has to stand between the people and whatever poisons life. On St. George's Day, the whole town became a stage. A dragon made of canvas and sticks, eyes glowing, smoke pouring from its jaws, wove through the crowd while a man inside yanked cords to snap the mouth. Kids screamed in delicious terror. A girl in white led it on a ribbon leash. And when the spear struck home, the beast belched smoke and collapsed, while drums roared like the end of the world. Then everybody processed to church, laughing and crying at once. That wasn't mockery. That was faith you could touch, taste, and cheer for. Cathedrals turned the lesson into stone and glass. Tympana over every door showed calm saints with dragons licking their boots. Column capitals twisted serpent bodies into vines. Pulpits rose from carvings of Michael or George, so every sermon literally stood on conquered evil. Illiterate farmers could read that louder than any Latin book. When plague rolled in, and bells never stopped tolling. Processions dragged wooden dragons through the streets and out the gates like they were casting the sickness itself into the fields. A priest who'd buried half the village in a week would try anything to give the living one more night of courage. In this world, the dragon wore two faces, and they were usually the same face. A real beast out in the marsh at dusk, and the devil snarling from the pulpit on Sunday. People weren't scared of fairy tales. They were scared a bad harvest or the sweat would break them. The saints and dragons stories looked that fear square in the eye and answered, "Here's a person, sometimes with a lance, sometimes with a psalm, sometimes just with a steady hand, who stands in the gap and does not run. Sometimes the saint fights, sometimes he sings and the monster drops to its knees. Sometimes he just blesses the well and the water turns sweet again." The shape fits the rhythm of a parish year like a glove. The ancient dragon never really changed, still guarding water, still lurking near treasure and roads, still troubling ships. But now people believe the right word, the right sign, the right prayer could stop it cold. Where old heroes swung thunderbolts, these new ones carry patience and incense. Where pagan kings sowed dragon teeth to birth cities, bishops planted fonts and taught folks to hold the line. The dragon became the perfect teacher of peril and hope both. By the time the Middle Ages hit full bloom, you couldn't spit without hitting a dragon. It spat rainwater from gargoyles, glared from bestiary pages, lay crushed under Michael on every rood screen, beat drums in village pageants till children squealed with joy, hung as a real crocodile from church beams, slain in Egypt, praise God, crouched in cave mouths in bedtime stories, while wind moaned through the trees. When medieval people said dragon, they meant danger faced together. Victory won by courage and grace, a shared language carved in stone and sung in every marketplace. And all of it, every spear thrust, every psalm, every parade, was preparing the ground for the next kind of tale. The one where ordinary men, not just saints, pick up the lance and ride out to meet the worm in the river. Are you ready? Because the age of knights is galloping straight at us, and the dragon is about to get very, very personal. Oh, sweet Lord, buckle up, because the saints have had their day with prayer and psalms. And now it's time for the regular guys, the knights, the farmers, the blacksmiths, the kids who grew up swinging sticks at shadows, to strap on iron and step into the fire. These stories hit different, leaner, meaner, soaked in sweat and blood and the smell of scorched thatch. They're about hunger that gnaws your belly and fear that freezes your feet to the dirt just as much as any sin of the soul. And the dragon, holy cow. The dragon finally spreads wings wide enough to blot out the sun, breathes fire that turns night into hell, and falls so hard in love with gold that the greed burns hotter than the flames coming out of its mouth. Can you feel the heat yet? Once the saints proved a whispered prayer could leash a monster, the everyday world grabbed hammers and said, "Hold my ale. We've got tricks of our own." Picture it. Dawn breaks to the smell of smoke and the thunder of hooves as whole villages wake to find their roofs on fire. Church doors get nailed with desperate notices. Any man with a steady hand and a sharper spear, come quick. Forges ring all night, sparks flying like angry stars, while a grizzled smith and a shaking squire Test a new blade on oak, thick as a dragon's neck. This isn't Sunday school anymore. This is survival, raw and roaring. The dragon in these tales isn't always the devil wearing scales. Sometimes it's just the thing that eats your sheep, drinks the mill pond dry, and makes your kids too scared to walk the lane after dark. And the men who ride out, they've got mail that clanks like funeral bells, spears longer than sin, and most important, a plan. Because muscle alone gets you barbecued, brains and preparation get you home to kiss your wife. The English ballads absolutely feast on these fights, and they love pinning them to real hills and real brooks, so old men can still point and say, "That's where the first scream went up." Take the lambton worm, my skin crawls every time. A cocky young heir skips Sunday mass to fish the river where he hooks something slick and pale with eyes that look right through him. Grossed out, he flings it down the village well and sails off to the Crusades to make his name. Years later, he rides home a hero, and the county is living in terror. That little thing grew in the dark until it burst out, wrapped itself around Lambton Hill like a living belt, swallowed cattle whole, and smashed stone cottages flat with one lazy flick of its tail. The heir, now white as milk with guilt, goes to a wise woman who tells him, "Stud your armor with razor blades and fight in the river so the current carries the pieces away." He does it. The worm lunges, coils to crush him, and slices itself to bloody ribbons on every spike. The river runs red for days. Victory. Right. Except he swore an oath to kill the first living thing he saw afterward to break the curse. His own father runs out cheering, and the heir can't raise the blade. From that day, the Lambton line is doomed. 9 generations of sorrow and early graves. You can kill the monster with forethought, but you do not leave the old debt unpaid. That one still keeps me up at night. Not far off, the Linton worm chews its way into legend. It lives in a cave, comes out to snatch livestock and scare travellers half to death on the road between farm and church. A border rider named Somerville forges a spearhead wide as a ploughshare, wraps it in pitch and tow, lights it blazing, and waits by the cave mouth. When the worm lunges, he rams burning death straight down its gullet. Smoke and stench roll across the heath, and the monster bursts like an overcooked sausage, quick, clean, and people in that country still nod and say, "That's why a little pitch and patience beats a dozen pretty swords." Then there's the Wantley dragon, and oh, this one's a riot. It comes down from the ridge just to knock stone walls flat for fun, swallows a child on her way to the well, and drinks the entire mill pond because it's thirsty. The hero, no shining saint, just more of Moor Hall, a rough, laughing, ale-swilling rogue who kisses widows and tells jokes dirty enough to make the parson blush. He has armour forged so thick with spikes he looks like a walking hedgehog, meets the dragon in a soft glen, wrestles and rolls, ducks under the belly, and, minstrels still cackle when they sing this, kicks the beast square in its one tender spot. The satire bites harder than the hoof, because sometimes the real dragon is the greedy lord with a title and a sharp quill pen, and sometimes the only answer is to build a suit that fits the fight and be shameless about it. There are gentler, sadder tales that break your heart in half. In Herefordshire, the Morderford dragon crawls out of half wood when it's just a tiny thing. A little girl named Maud finds it, feeds it milk from her own cup, and it grows tame only for her gentle voice. Years pass, and it starts taking sheep, then cattle, then men. The village can't bear any more. Archers and pikemen lure it into a field, form a wagon wedge, brace their spears, and when it charges, the points rip its throat open. They bury the body and name an oak after the girl who loves something that could never love her back without destroying everything. Pity and duty sit side by side on that tree, heavy as winter rain. In Krakow, the Wawel dragon lives under the castle hill, snatching cattle from the Vistula pastures until every knight who tries dies screaming. A humble cobbler's apprentice, nobody important, stuffs a calfskin with sulphur and pitch and leaves it by the cave like takeout. The dragon gulps it down, thirst hits like a hammer. It races to the river and drinks until, boom, it bursts open like a rotten melon. The city cheers, says a prayer for the clever boy, and to this day, a bronze dragon on the riverbank breathes fire on the hour for wide-eyed kids. The old trick still warms every face that watches. French chansons and English romances dress the same fights in silk and courtly love, but the heart is identical. Sir Bevis of Hampton gets exiled, grows hard abroad, comes home with a sword named Morglay, and slays a dragon that's been torching peasants near Southampton. Guy of Warwick, swollen with pride, goes on pilgrimage, comes home lean and repentant, and still has to fight a dragon in Northumberland, plus a giant and a cow the size of a barn, because why not? These poems never let a nobleman forget. A great house isn't a shield against monsters. It's the place you ride out from with a spear and a promise to answer for every burned cottage on your land. Eastward, the Slavic bylining rattle like winter iron. Dobrynya Nikitich gets warned by his mother, never bathe in that river, never step on that stone. Of course he does both, because a young warrior has to test every law. Out boils Zmi Gorenich, 3 heads spitting fire and venom. They fight 3 solid days in boiling streams until Dobrynya drives the monster to the Puchai stone where worlds collide, hacks off 3 heads, then 3 more when the dragon's wives come howling for revenge. Sometimes he frees a princess, sometimes a whole city gasps its first free breath in years. These fights are long, dirty, and feel like a winter that refuses to end until a man spends every ounce of flesh he has. Walk the Welsh marches and stare at the bear patch on Dragon Hill, where they say, dragon blood soaked the ground so deep nothing grows, even today. A knight with a red cross on white fights a serpent whose hiss carries for miles. Whether they call him George or just the rider, the memory ties a bright blade to real earth and whispers, the wound that saves a village can scar the land forever. And underneath all the romance and blood, there is craft. Cold, clever, beautiful craft. These stories stop to tell you exactly what the fighter wore and why. Thick gambeson under mail so a crushing tail doesn't snap ribs like twigs. Rawhide shrunk tight on the shield so it won't split on the first hit. Ashwood spear with an iron shoe so the butt doesn't shatter when you plant it in the ground. If the tail gives the dragon fire, the knight soaks his cloak and flips it over the head like a hood for one precious heartbeat. If it spits venom, he fights up wind or ties a wine-soaked kerchief across his face for courage. Pitch and tow on spearheads because fire travels faster than legs. Lime dust to blind, caltrops to lame, bells to startle, dogs to track it through the reeds at night. The shining hero on the tapestry might look clean and perfect, But the village that raised him knows he carried a sack of dirty tricks and thanked heaven for every single one. The fights repeat like drumbeats, a fouled spring that has to be cleaned, a narrow bridge where one man can hold a dragon, a sunken lane that funnels the monster right onto the spear, a cave mouth that frames the head for one perfect thrust, and always that stubborn faith in the belly strike. From Sigurd crawling under Fafnir to the archer who finds the soft spot under Beowulf's dragon's wing, every story insists, even a wall of scales has a seam, and that seam is there for the patient and the desperate. Many of these dragons are mad, raving lovers of treasure. Kill one and you stand in a cave where torchlight sings on gold like struck bells. Piled cups tilt against ancient swords. Coins lie in drifts so deep your boots disappear, and the silence is broken only by the tiny chime of metal shifting under your weight. It's beautiful and terrible, and every ballad knows the danger. Touch it wrong, and the greed will eat you from the inside out. These aren't just fights. They're the moment when ordinary men grab the story from the saints and write it in blood and iron across every hill and river they call home. And I'm telling you, my heart is pounding because the age of the common dragon slayer has arrived, and the fire is only getting hotter. Oh, walk into that cave behind the night and tell me your heart doesn't stop. The torchlight hits the gold and the whole world goes silent, except for the tiny, treacherous chime of coins shifting under your boot. It's a dangerous quiet, the kind that swallows men whole. The old poems knew it better than any preacher. Leave a horde sleeping in the dark, and you wake a worm every single time. That's why the smart hero yells for the whole village to come in, daylight streaming behind them, and they carry the treasure out in the open to pay for bridges, walls, bread, weddings, anything that keeps life moving. Bury it again with a dead king and sing the warning loud, because gold that passes through open hands feeds people. Gold that hides breeds dragons. The dragon itself becomes the harshest teacher of thrift and duty any priest ever dreamed of. Greed isn't just a sin, it's a fire-breathing death sentence. And here's what always makes me want to stand up and cheer. Courage stops being royal. The greatest slayers aren't princes on white chargers. A cobbler with a head full of sulphur and pitch outsmarts a monster that ate armies. A farmer straps kitchen knives to his coat and wades into the river, knowing the current will do half the killing for him. A border rider realizes a burning spear down the throat beats 100 pretty sword strokes. These ballads shout the names loud: Lambton, Linton, Sockburn, Moor Hall, and pin them to real hills, so your grandpa can still point and say, "There's where a common man saved us all." When a new bishop crossed the Tees at Durham, the locals handed him the actual falchion that killed the Sockburn worm, and he blessed it and confirmed their rights, because the sword of a plain man and the seal of a churchman both hold back dragons, the scaly kind and the tax-collecting kind. That ceremony still gives me goosebumps. Art raced to keep up. Tomb carvers put dragons under every knight's stone feet, so the dead would rest forever victorious. Church painters gave rough local slayers the exact same calm eyes they gave St. George. Heralds slapped dragons on shields, not just to scare enemies, but to scream. Someone in this house once stood in the lane when the fire came and did not run. The same creature spitting rainwater from a corbel, demon pinned in place, became a promise on a war shield. Someone here will stand when the bell rings at noon. And no matter how much steel and swagger the knights brought, the stories never forgot the old ways. Victory is still communal. A wife runs up with a torch at the perfect second and sears the neck that keeps healing. A smith hammers one rivet that refuses to break. A wise woman tells the trembling boy, "Stand in the river, let the water be your friend." The worst defeats, always the proud fool who rides out alone for the glory. The dragon gives him a quiet field and then eats him, horse and all. Pride goeth before a very crispy death. By the end of the medieval age, the knight's dragon has turned into a mirror you can't look away from. Lie on gold, and it shows greed naked and drooling. Stalk out at night to burn barns, and it shows raw hunger. But raise a banner over terrified farmers clutching ash spears, and it shows fear faced together. And when the hero wins with the right edge, the right bait, the right ground, the right friends, it shows wit and work and love, stronger than any fire. Lords and ploughmen learn the same lesson from the same smoking battlefield. You face what threatens your home with whatever you've got and whoever you trust, and you never, ever expect the world to fight fair. Those ballads became the DNA of every dragon story that came after. The barrow under the turf, the voice promising death, the one soft scale under the wing, the bright hoard stinking of smoke, the good sword with a name, the fool who laughs at tricks because he thinks courage is only muscle. From that blood-soaked ground, the dragon struts out of the village and straight into the bookshop, ready to talk, to sneer, to play the villain and the philosopher, and sometimes even the friend. Feel the ground shift in the 19th century. The old songs leave the hearth and slide between cloth covers with gilt titles. Scholars hunt them down, print them in thick volumes for families to read by lamplight, and suddenly children's shelves are stuffed with fairy tales carrying ghosts of barrows and saints' days inside engraved borders. The dragon is no longer a rumour from the next valley. It's a creature writers can shape with memory and ambition and a brand new kind of love. The Brothers Grimm open the door, letting serpents and worms that survived in kitchens and fields march right into print. Andrew Lang's coloured fairy books line dragons up beside foolish princes and brave ploughmen like it's the most natural thing in the world. The hunger for everything medieval explodes. Gustave Doré and Arthur Rackham etch coils and claws that look like living shadow. William Morris writes romances that feel like stepping into a tapestry. Painters put knights under towers that never saw gunpowder. Wagner drags a brooding gold hoard onto the stage and names the dragon Fafnir. His music is greed itself, eating the singer alive. Then one quiet scholar in Oxford changes everything forever. J.R.R. Tolkien, who spent his life drowning in old tongues and older songs, stands up in a lecture hall and declares that Beowulf's dragon isn't a mistake. It's the hinge the whole poem swings on. He goes home and births Smaug, 1937, The Hobbit. And the world has never been the same. Smaug wakes like a banked furnace, fills the lonely mountain with sulphur breath, toys with a trembling burglar the way a cat toys with a mouse, sniffs dwarf and pony and stolen cup, counts his hoard without moving a muscle, and speaks in a voice that tastes of molten metal and centuries of arrogance. Tolkien gives him vanity, cunning, and, most terrifying, a mind convinced it's the only sane one in the room. That single conversation in the dark pulls every northern dragon, Fafnir, the barrow worm, the fire that can't be quenched, into one golden chamber, one missing scale, one black arrow, and an entire age catches fire. In The Lord of the Rings, he scatters dragon ghosts across the map, cold drakes from the wasted north, Scartha the worm slain long ago, the ruined forges of a metal-loving empire, because dragons are history now, the warning that pride and fire outlive their makers. For a whole generation, Smaug alone was enough to fill 1,000 winter nights with delicious terror. But the creature refused to stay in one shape. C.S. Lewis took a spoiled, selfish boy named Eustace, turned him into a dragon on an island of hot springs and loneliness, and let him learn pain, pity, and the tearing grace that peels greed away and leaves a scarred boy who finally understands love. Kenneth Grahame gave us the reluctant dragon, a poetry-quoting pacifist who just wants tea and gossip, and a knight who stages a fake fight so the village can keep its story and its peace. Ursula Le Guin stepped out of the mist with earthsea dragons who speak the true language of creation, bargaining with names instead of gold, ancient and untouchable, recognizing kinship but never love, because that would be too easy. Anne McCaffrey crossed into science fiction and gave us Pern, dragons engineered by human hands to flame deadly thread from the sky, bonded mind to mind, closer than marriage, fiercer than war, carrying riders between heartbeats and across time itself. Terry Pratchett's stuffed swamp dragons, nervous, explosive little things, and one noble king of dragons raised by a bookish girl into his flat world. Robin Hobb sent half-formed dragons struggling for memory and justice down rivers of pain. Naomi Novik dropped dragons into the Napoleonic Wars, imagined Trafalgar with wings and fire, and gave a captain a hatchling he never meant to love. Christopher Paolini let a farm boy cradle a stone that hatched into the oldest warmth in the world, the bond between a growing life and the human who chooses to protect it. Every single one of them, funny, tragic, terrifying, tender, is still the same dragon, born in a cave of cursed gold, still teaching us that courage, greed, love, and fire all live in the same scaly skin. And when you stand in that long, shining line from a boy with a kitchen knife in a river to a hobbit facing a mountain of gold, don't you feel it in your bones? The dragon never left us. It just learned to talk, to laugh, to cry, to fly between pages and hearts, and it is still asking the same ancient question with every roar. What kind of person are you when the fire comes? Tell me your pulse isn't racing, because the story is nowhere near over. Oh my heart, stop just a second and feel this. Patricia R. Eddings. No, Patricia Reddick puts a teacup in a princess's trembling hand and sends her walking into a cave to have polite conversation with a dragon, like it's the cranky old neighbour down the lane. And that single quiet act of courage is braver than any sword-swinging charge in the history of the world. Can you even imagine the hush, the steam curling from the cup, the dragon's eye narrowing in disbelief, and the princess saying, "2 sugars, or do you take it plain?" That's the moment the dragon stops being only a monster and becomes someone you could love, someone you could lose, someone who might just love you back. And the kids who grew up on that scene, They carried dragons everywhere, into classrooms where they argued over whether Smaug was misunderstood, into coffee shops where they sketched wings on napkins, into late-night dorm rooms where they swore they'd be the kind of friend a dragon could trust. Some wrote them as enemies again because, come on, a story still needs teeth and terror. Others turned them into entire nations, exiled gods, battered survivors, sharp-tongued lawyers, mothers who would glass a city if you looked at their kid wrong. The very best writers never let the dragon be a prop. A horde isn't evil in the abstract. It's a choice to lock away what starving people need. Fire isn't a special effect. It's hunger you can see from 10 miles away. A flight across mountains isn't scenery. It's a perspective no human foot will ever earn. Hold those truths steady, and the dragon breathes real smoke, and the page gets so warm you have to set the book down to wipe your eyes. Illustrators were right there in the trenches, fighting with ink and paint to make sure we never forgot what a dragon looks like when it's alive. Pauline Baines drew Smaug like a living ruby that decided to move. Every curve of him glints with malice and magnificence. Alan Lee and John Howe gave us scales that remember damp stone and centuries of ash. Eyes that have seen kingdoms rise and fall. Michael Whelan lit McCaffrey's dragons against skies so real you could feel the wind trying to rip the book from your hands. 4 legs and bat wings for the western airs. Long serpentine ribbons of power for the eastern ones. Eyes too clear for comfort. Teeth built for precision. Claws delicate enough to lift a teacup or strong enough to shred a shield. Smoke that coils out like a warning before the fire even thinks about arriving. And a tail, never just a rope, that makes choices, that lashes in fury or curls protectively around a friend. That's the new canon, burned into every cover and margin. And we all fell in love at first sight. And the voices, oh, the voices. Smaug purrs like poisoned honey, and every promise drips with teeth. Fafnir mutters from the dark, like he's already tired of existing. Earthsea dragons speak a language that would char a human throat to cinders. McCaffrey's dragons can switch from gentle telepathic kindness to steel-hard rage in the space of one heartbeat when their rider is threatened. Pratchett's noble dragon talks like a monarch who read the wrong philosophy books and truly believes the world was written for him alone. Robin Hobb's dragons wake from broken memories into an anger that is never blind. It sees everything you did to them. Each voice is a fingerprint, telling you exactly what that dragon means in its world. Miser, storm, friend with claws, wounded survivor, judge, mother, God. And the best ones never let you forget that a friend with talons is still a friend. Why did all this explode right now, in our age, instead of 1,000 years ago? Printing, baby. For the first time, monsters got the same immortality as saints and emperors. A kid in a concrete city, 1,000 miles from any more, could crack open a book after school and suddenly be nose to nose with a dragon in a cave. And the modern world, wars, factories, screens blinking 24/7, left us starving for something ancient. Something that remembered when wealth was more than bank accounts, when power was more than horsepower, when courage could be one small person walking into the dark with nothing but a steady voice and a hand that refused to shake. In a century that invented bombs and televisions, the dragon handed writers the perfect way to talk about greed that kills from a distance. courage that looks like quiet care instead of fireworks, and promises between minds that hold fast when the sky itself is falling. Then the worlds crash together like beautiful thunder. Translators and travelers carried East Asian tales west, rain-bringing dragon kings, serpents sheltering the Buddha, and suddenly picture books had Chinese long curling beside Western fireworms. Some writers bowed deeply. They wrote dragons of river and cloud who would be insulted by a horde, who sat on thrones and asked what duty really costs. Others mixed everything in a glorious mess and invented something brand new that tastes like right now, in a world where symbols cross oceans faster than clipper ships ever did. The best fusions feel like reverence, not robbery. They teach a kid in Ohio that a dragon can be a neighbor instead of an enemy. That water can be holy instead of just something that drowns you. So the shelves groaned under the weight, and a new pattern settled into the bones of every dragon tale. Adversary, craft and nerve. Ally, trust and heartbreaking cost. Ancient mind, listening until your soul hurts. Or mirror, the hardest look you'll ever give the greedy, frightened thing inside your own chest. The masterpieces braid all four together. A dragon can be your best friend, and still the deadliest test you'll ever face can be older than language and still have a mouth that burns. And somehow, against all odds, the same beast that once guarded cursed gold in a barrow walked out of those stories, stepped between the pages of books, and learned to speak, to think, to love and grieve with us. It learned to live long enough to be handed from one generation to the next, changing a little every time, scarred, wiser, funnier, sadder, because that's what literature does with anything that matters. It keeps it breathing in the light and gives it new work to do. But the dragon wasn't content with paper. It wanted the dark of a theatre and the glow of the screen. Before CGI, before anything, 19th century showmen were already unrolling giant painted panoramas of knights battling dragons, while hidden organs roared like the end of the world. Toy theatres sold paper cutout dragons so kids could stage their own last stands on the kitchen table. When moving pictures were born, the hunger was already there. How do you make smoke and legend feel like it has weight, like it could crush you? Early reels tried animation and jump cuts. A painted serpent rising from a tank, vanishing, reappearing. But the craft grew teeth. Ray Harryhausen, bless that man, gave us stop-motion dragons that moved like living nightmares. A chained beast clashing with a cyclops. Jason's many-headed hydra, writhing neck by neck while you clutched the armrest. Light hit real scales. Eyes caught the glow. Tails dragged shadows that made every kid in the third row curl their toes in delicious terror. Then 1981 happened, and Dragonslayer dropped Vermithrax Pejorative, a name like a sword dragged across stone, into theatres, and everything changed forever. That dragon crawled, leapt, owned the screen with cruel, ancient grace, wings creaking like old ship sails, lair stinking of bones and time, fire pouring out in sheets heavy as water. For once, the countryside looked like a real place where people grew turnips and prayed not to die. Mud on the boots, fear in the voices. People walked out arguing and went straight back in to watch again. To this day, every concept artist measures their dragon against Vermithrax's long head and ragged wing. That's the gold standard, baby. Animation refused to be left behind. Disney turned Maleficent into a dragon, and an entire cliff grew fangs and hatred. Years later, Pete's dragon gave us Elliot. Big, green, soft-hearted, invisible to everyone but the boy who needed him most, and proved kindness could wear scales. The never-ending story launched Folklore, the luck dragon with fur white as hope, carrying a broken child across the sky on a smile. The 90s gave dragons real voices. Dragonheart's Draco cracking jokes with Sean Connery's Gravel, bound by an oath older than kingdoms, teaching a knight that honor sometimes means sharing your last heartbeat. Reign of Fire turned London into a dragon's hunting ground. Fire was harvest, and humanity was the crop. Peter Jackson brought Smaug back, with Benedict Cumberbatch's voice curling like smoke, every word dripping metal and centuries of entitlement. Game of Thrones hatched 3 babies that grew into weapons of mass destruction, and never let you forget the cost. One burned field, and you saw the ashes of next year's bread. How to Train Your Dragon took every stereotype, hugged it, flipped it upside down, and made us cry over a boy learning to ride the wind by listening to a creature everyone else wanted dead. The music lifted the seats. The flight scenes felt like your own first heartbeat of freedom. And every harness repair, every saddle test, every shared look said the same thing. This isn't about conquest. It's about 2 species choosing to be better together. And Spirit Away gave us Haku, river spirit turned dragon, long and lithe and aching with lost memory, moving through air like it was water, kind and wary and ancient, teaching a little girl that names have power. And sometimes the bravest thing is remembering who you really are. From paper to screen, from cave to cinema, the dragon never stopped growing, never stopped asking the same raw questions with smoke on its breath. What will you do when the fire comes? Will you hoard or share? Will you fight or listen? Will you love something that could kill you in a heartbeat? And every time, every single time, the best stories answer with tears and laughter, and a hand reaching out across the impossible distance between human and monster, saying, "We're in this together." That's the dragon we carry now, scarred, funny, terrifying, wise, forever changing. And if your heart isn't pounding, and your eyes aren't wet, check your pulse. Because the greatest story ever told just looked you in the eye and breathed fire and wonder all over your soul. Oh, sweet mercy, just breathe for a second. Because in Spirited Away, a scared little girl named Chihiro stands in front of a dragon who's bleeding silver and forgetting his own name, and all she has is the true name she heard once on the wind. She screams it across the water, Haku, river of the Yubaba Valley. And in that single heartbeat the spell cracks, the chains fall away, and the dragon remembers he is a river, wild and ancient and free again. No horde, no spear, no roaring battle, just the terrifying, gentle work of remembering who someone really is, and the even harder work of letting them go. I still cry every single time the sky fills with wings and the river spirit soars home. That's the moment the dragon became something you could break your heart, loving. And television? Television had been waiting its whole life for that moment. The 80s exploded with a cartoon where a gang of kids rolled dice and suddenly met Tiamat. 5 raging heads, each one a different nightmare. For millions of us, that was the first time a dragon had more than one face and a name that tasted like doom. Then Game of Thrones stormed in and asked the question that stopped every heart. What if dragons weren't bedtime stories, but living, breathing facts staring down from the city walls? They needed armies of artists, years of patience, and when those beasts finally landed, bending grass, kicking up dust, casting shadows that made hardened soldiers flinch. You could smell the sulphur. They didn't just show up to burn. They slept in courtyards like cats the size of houses, strained against chains thick as ship masts, cracked bones like kindling while they ate. You learned the difference between a dragon that's hungry and one that's angry, and both could end the world. Games grabbed the dragon and turned it into the ultimate test of everything you are. At the tabletop, the 1974 Dungeons and Dragons rules said, "Here's a red dragon. Roll initiative and pray." One 5-headed queen guarded her eggs with apocalyptic rage. One ancient gold dragon ruled the sky with calm, lawful majesty. Those names jumped from rulebooks to novels to Friday nights where friends still shout them like battle cries. On screens, Skyrim let you stand on a mountain and scream ancient words until the sky split and a dragon dove like judgment itself. Half duel, half hunt. Every roar echoing off the ridge while you counted breaths and decided whether to stand or sprint for the ruined tower. Some games made them final dungeon guardians, others literal gods wearing scales, and some, oh my heart, let you raise one from a leathery egg and carry it through war like the other half of your soul. The lesson never changed from the old Barrow fields. Knowledge first, courage second, luck if the gods are kind. Card tables and living room floors turned dragons into obsessions. A red-winged terror became the ultimate prize on a magic. The Gathering card. Elder dragons planned across centuries and shattered worlds with pure intellect. Kids traded cards, screaming Shivan dragon like it was a battle cry. And one boy collected 7 glowing orbs to summon Shenron, a sky serpent who granted the kind of wishes that change everything. Those plastic rectangles and glowing screens weren't just enemies. They were goals, puzzles, trophies that turned an ordinary afternoon into a saga you bragged about for weeks. Music and sport stole the shape and made it roar for pride instead of fear. A red dragon on green and white waves from Welsh castles to rugby pitches, keeping a nation's memory alive every time the crowd sings. Clubs marched out with dragons on their shirts, and stadiums shook with drums and hope. Universities told freshmen, be dragons, breathe honest fire in everything you do. The old terror melted away, but the grit, the never surrender heart, that stayed. Theme parks and parades turned festivals into living books. Silken wire dragons snaked over crowds while drums thundered like the sky cracking open. In Disney, a dragon perched on a bank and breathed real fire on the hour. Kids shrieked, stepped back, then laughed when the heat kissed their cheeks. Toy aisles exploded with plastic and plush. Every Christmas morning, a new dragon found a home. Modelers hunched over kitchen tables with magnifiers and X-Acto knives, painting eyes that looked alive from 3 feet away. Nature shows pointed at Komodo dragons and whispered, "See? A mouthful of bacteria and a tail like a club. Dragon enough if you get too close." Documentaries staged fake digs and asked, what if we really found dragon bones? Scientists grinned and explained wings and fire, and let us hold both the dream and the science without breaking either. Technology rewrote the rules. Practical models jerked heads and beat wings, while CGI made every scale ripple from nose to tail. The best mixed both. A real torch became a sheet of flame that scorched a shield. Ash stuck to an actor's cheek because a makeup artist was up at 4 a.m. Making it real, a rider leaned on a bucking rig, while a green wall waited to become a storm-swept sky. The difference between a dragon you remember forever and one you forget by the credits. Respect. Respect for light, weight, memory, for the fact that a dragon is a character with scars and habits and a past, not just a noise that burns a barn. And through every single shape, plush toy, parade float, CGI apocalypse, the oldest themes refuse to die. Greed still draws trouble like blood draws sharks. Power without duty still costs cities. Trust still turns terror into strength. Names still have weight. A watcher at a spring is as old as the first village and as new as your phone's lock screen. When a dragon lands, the story still has to choose. Storm to endure, neighbor to understand, or mirror showing the greedy thing you've become. The great ones never rush that choice. They let the dragon be terrible and noble in the same breath. Let the awe of truth do its slow, burning work. So now the dragon lives everywhere, on theatre screens that shake with its roar, on couches where families cheer together, on game nights where dice decide kingdoms, in schoolyards where kids draw wings on their sneakers, on jerseys where whole cities scream its name. It's a sound cue, a team mascot, a blue glow on a phone at 2 a.m. And it's still the shape you glimpse when storm clouds stack over a cornfield and your heart slams against your ribs for no reason you can name. And if you dare to line up every dragon we've met on this wild ride, the river spirit freed by a little girl's memory, Tiamat's 5 heads, Smaug's golden sneer, Vermithrax's cruel grace, Toothless learning to trust, Haku remembering his name, Falcor carrying a child out of despair. The first thing that would hit you like summer thunder is that every single one wears the shape of its homeland. Where rivers rule the year, the dragon is long and lithe, riding cloud and rain, like it invented weather. Where winters bite and barrows stud the hills, it lies heavy on treasure and memory, wings folded like judgment. Where kings must prove heaven itself chose them, the dragon coils on banners and robes, pearl just out of reach. Wisdom or thunder, only the worthy can claim. In China, it speaks water, order, right rule. 5 clawed on the emperor's robe, promising rain on time and granaries full. 9 dragons on palace walls, staring down courtiers who forget who keeps the balance. In the streets, it's boat races and silk dances, drums becoming thunder, while a city begs the year to be kind. Even the stars put the azure dragon in the east to guard spring. A spring wind is a dragon stirring. A sudden storm is a dragon rolling over in sleep. It is patron, hope, warning. Turn your face away with flood or drought, and the dragon turns with you. Across India and Southeast Asia, the Naga kings weave water and life so tight you can't pull them apart. Hooded fans guard temple stairs and sacred springs. Angkor's bridges are living stone serpents, cities born from marriages between princes and river princesses. Villages honor Manasa for keeping snakebite away and fields fertile. Mukalinda spreads hoods over the meditating Buddha because wisdom needs shelter when storms rage. Laos and Thailand keep shrines where the current looks watchful. Boat races begging for good harvest. Korea's Imugi endures 1,000 years for one pearl that lifts it into the sky. Patience and worth can raise anyone. Japan's Ryu pours clean water from bronze mouths at temple basins, so every worshipper remembers water is gift and names are power. In the West, the landscape asks different things, and the dragon answers with fire and gold and a question that still burns. Who are you when everything you love is on the line? The creature belongs to every single one of us now, as much as it ever did to the first child who looked at a storm cloud and saw a spine and wings. It walks into a century of new tools and ancient needs, still breathing smoke, still asking with every roar and every gentle nuzzle, what will you do when the fire comes? Will you hoard or share? Will you fight or listen? Will you remember the name that sets a river free? And if your pulse isn't racing and your eyes aren't shining, check again. Because the greatest story ever told just looked you in the eye, smiled with a mouth full of fire and stars, and dared you to be brave enough to love it back. Oh, stop everything and listen, because right here, the dragon looks you dead in the eye, and you feel seen all the way to your bones. In Greek, the very word drakon comes from the one who stares, the sleepless watcher coiled beside a spring that feeds a whole city, or curled under a tree dripping golden apples no thief can touch. It guards the fleece that glows like captured moonlight, and it never, ever blinks. Step 1 foot closer with greed in your heart or a plan to tear down the old order, and those eyes snap open like Judgment Day. The hero who finally kills it or sings it to sleep has to prove more than muscle. He has to prove he's right, that the world is ready for whatever comes next. Delphi only becomes Apollo's after Python's blood soaks the ground. Thebes only rises after Cadmus slays the sacred serpent, pays in years of exile, and sows teeth that sprout armed men who hack each other down until 5 are left to raise the walls. Every new city is born owing a dragon's price. Tell me that doesn't make your chest tight. Then, the creature slithers north, where winter is a fist that never opens, and everything changes in the most heartbreaking way. Men bury gold with their dead, because in winter, food and coin feel like the same thing. Both keep you breathing. So, the dragon learns to love treasure the way drowning men love air. It lies on hoards in frozen barrows, because that's where human greed goes to sleep and wakes up wearing scales. Fafnir is the nightmare that still haunts me. A man who loved gold so much he murdered his own father, crawled into the dark, and literally turned into the thing that loves it most. Poison breath, sleepless eyes, heart cold as the metal he cradles. The Beowulf dragon is the final exam for a king who's already paid every price life can demand. One stolen cup, and it burns half the kingdom in revenge. Nidhogger gnaws the world tree's root to remind us that every good thing has rot working at its base, and neglect is an open invitation. And Jörmungandr sleeps in the sea with its tail in its mouth, so huge that honest sailors feel the horizon shrink when they think about it. These aren't just monsters. They're winter, wealth, the slow patience of trouble, and the terrifying cost of keeping a people alive. Can you feel the ice on your skin yet? Then, the church bells start ringing, and the dragon puts on Sunday clothes that make it even scarier. Suddenly, every village square has a story you can read on a scaled belly. Pride and greed coil in the dark and breathe out plague and slander. Along comes a saint with nothing but prayer and 1,000 mornings of the same words. and the well runs clear again. Sometimes the dragon drops to its knees when a woman sings a psalm. Sometimes it dies under a lance after the whole town swears to change its life. Gargoyles, those twisted stone faces, spit rain off cathedral roofs so the saints stay dry. The same serpent that once poisoned rivers now keeps the church safe. The message is so practical, it hurts. Order your world, honor what feeds you, and don't hoard when your neighbor's kid is hungry. But there are places where the serpent isn't scary at all, it's a teacher wearing feathers. Among the Maya and the Mexica, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, strides between sky and earth with quetzal plumes blazing like green fire. He brings wind, calendars, learning, the terrifying burden of office. On the equinox, the shadow of the pyramid stair slides down the stone like a living serpent of light coming to greet the people. This isn't a monster guarding gold. This is a god who hands you order and says, pay the price or lose everything. Knowledge has edges, and the one who carries it has to accept limits, or the gods take it back in blood. Heraldry and flags keep the old meanings alive like battle scars. Wales flies a red dragon that remembers centuries of fighting for its name. Bhutan's thunder dragon snarls from the flag and tells every traveller, storms and conscience live here. Cities carve dragons on bridges and seals, half local snake, half demon, all pride. The Roman Draco, cloth body, bronze head, becomes the rallying cry that sounds like wind screaming through a living throat. We watch, we will not move. We claim this ground. Even dusty old books steal the serpent for diagrams. The Ouroboros, snake eating its tail, shows up in alchemical texts, whispering the same thing the sea serpent does. All things feed what follows. Endings feed beginnings. Mind the seam where one becomes the other. A world-circling dragon in a poem does the same job, only louder. And across every culture, the same hard truths hammer like thunder. First, water is life, and whoever controls water controls life. When a dragon rules cloud and river, people learn respect fast, and rulers learn they better deserve the robe. Second, wealth kept in the dark brings ruin. A dragon on a hoard means a boy with a shovel is about to lie in a trench, and a village is about to burn. Third, boundaries matter. Springs, doorways, bridges, field edges belong to everyone and no one. Keep your promises, or the watcher turns enemy. Fourth, courage is private and public at once. A saint with a leash, a knight with a spear, a cobbler with sulphur, a farmer with knives on his coat, a magistrate fasting for rain, a mother with the torch. Every single one faces a dragon so the rest of us can drink, plant, sleep, and wake to work. And the final truth that breaks me every time, dragons are never simple symbols. They bless and they blight. They mean pride and rightful rule. They burn barns and pour clean water from stone mouths. That's why they endure. A culture can hang every fear and every hope on the same scaled back and still be understood. A story can travel from rice paddy to palace to village school and never lose the thread because the creature is big enough to carry it all without snapping. Put it all together and you see why every single age finds its own dragon and falls in love again. A riverside village sees a long body in the clouds and beats drums for rain. A court stitches dragons on silk and trembles when the harvest fails. A greedy hall learns what guilt looks like when it wakes up wearing scales. A church sets the beast to spitting rainwater off saints so the poor stay dry. A nation needing courage for a hard winter or a harder match paints a dragon on its flag and roars under its shadow. Through every shape and every century, the dragon stays exactly what it always was. The face of power that can help or harm. The test of the heart holding the spear. The story that teaches work and watchfulness in the language of fire and water and scale. And if you want to know why dragons keep coming back, why we can't quit them no matter how many centuries roll by, walk into an old Chinese medicine shop and stare at the jars labelled Long Gu, dragon bone. For hundreds of years, apothecaries ground those fossils into powder for fevers and broken bones. And nobody knew they were dinosaur remnants sleeping in stone long before cities existed. A farmer digs up a jaw bigger than an ox and sells it to a merchant who slaps a tag on it. Dragon. People carry the powder home in paper packets and swear it works miracles. A myth you can hold in your hand, that's power. Across the planet, the same thing happens. A shepherd lifts a rock and finds ribs like ship beams. Fishermen haul up black spearhead teeth and call them tongues turned to stone. An English farmer pulls a horn longer than his arm from the mud, and the village instantly says giant or dragon. Same difference. Church porches hang whale jaws so big the shadow feels safe. When something that massive shows up in your field, your mind grabs the oldest, toughest word it knows, dragon. It's a hard word. It doesn't leak doubt. Real animals keep the tale alive too. A Nile croc swept upstream by flood looks exactly like a dragon to terrified villagers. Whales surface with backs like islands and vanish, leaving sailors speechless for life. An oarfish unfurls under a wave like living silver, and the mind screams, sea serpent, before it can think twice. On Komodo, a lizard the size of a pony watches with ancient eyes, pads forward and drops a goat without hurry. The people there didn't need books. They already had the perfect name. Sky and stone throw in their own proof. Meteors scar the earth, and elders point at the crater when comets blaze overhead. Dragon fell here, watch yourself. Belemnites, little fossil spears, turn up in ploughed fields and become thunderbolts tucked under roof beams for luck. Volcanoes cough fire and ash, like the breath of something huge and angry waking underground. A lake burps poison gas, and the story writes itself. Before science had words, people reached for the oldest story on the shelf and hung every mystery on dragon wings. And the deepest magic of all, our own eyes and brains help the dragon live forever. We see faces in clouds, monsters in shadows, because that's how we stayed alive on the savannah. A storm ridge on the horizon looks like a neck and jaws, and your heart leaps before your mind catches up. A cave mouth breathes cold air, and something inside you whispers, "Dragon." We're wired for it. We prefer to be wrong and run than right and dead. So the dragon isn't going anywhere. It's carved into our retinas, whispered in our pulse, written in the very shape of fear and wonder. And every time a child looks at a cloud or a fossil or a shadow on the wall and feels that electric jolt, the oldest, greatest story roars back to life, scales gleaming, eyes wide open, daring us to be brave enough to meet it halfway. Tell me your heart isn't thundering right now, because the dragon just looked straight at you and smiled. Oh, stop right there and feel this in your chest, because the dragon isn't just out there in some old book. It's inside the way you look at the world. You ever stare at a cloud on a blazing hot afternoon and swear that ridge is a neck, that darker smudge is a jaw, and for one impossible heartbeat, you're waiting for it to turn and look straight at you? You ever walk past a cave and feel cold breath on your face and think, something's breathing in there? You ever hear the river hiss around a root and freeze because your brain just screamed, dragon? Nobody taught you that. No priest, no poet, no teacher. It's hardwired. We spot movement at the edge of sight. We fill the blanks with the scariest shape that fits. And we'd rather sprint away embarrassed than stand still and die. That's survival carved into our bones. And the dragon is the perfect storm of every ancient terror that kept our ancestors alive long enough to become us. Anthropologists love this stuff. We're terrified of snakes in the grass. Check. Big cats that watch without blinking. Check. Raptors dropping out of the sky like arrows. Check. Mash those three nightmares together in the flickering light of a cave mouth or the blinding glare of the savannah, and boom, you've got a creature the size of everything that can kill you from ground, grass, or air. Give it armor because panic needs something. Teeth can't pierce right away. Give it fire breath because nothing in the world scares us more than something we can't turn our backs on. The dragon never walked the earth, but it matches exactly how we learn to stay breathing. That's why every culture on the planet looked at the same shadows and saw the same impossible beast. Then the medieval wonder books piled on more rope to the bundle. Lapidaries swore draconites. Gems cut from living dragon brains could cure anything. Picture the scene that gave me chills. A lord with a knife. 3 shaking men holding a sack under a sleeping dragon's jaw. A priest whispering prayers that the monster's dying breath blesses the stone, instead of cursing it forever. That's a parable about daring and the insane value of things paid for with your life. Good myths always double as lessons in commerce and raw guts. Real mistakes turned into evidence that refused to die. A bishop keeps a megalodon tooth on his desk, calls it a dragon tongue, presses it to a poisoned man's throat, and when the guy lives, it goes straight into the reliquary. A crusader nails a crocodile skin to the church beam, and every kid grows up staring at it, half terrified, half safe. When fishermen lose a boat in fog and bodies wash up, the priest just points upward. Old powers never left, and fear still has a shape. That skin hung there for centuries, doing its quiet work. And let's be honest, a dragon is the perfect villain for practical reasons too. Big enough to scare a whole city into working together, but not an army you have to feud with forever, and not a neighbor who will burn your house next Tuesday. It blocks the spring or the road, sets a deadline, 7 cows or 7 virgins by next moon, and everybody can see the plan when the hero finally stands up. Way better than a creeping thing that slinks cottage to cottage, making people bar the doors and whisper. A dragon sits in plain sight and dares you to be brave together. It's also the ultimate test. Hide like iron, breath like the end of the world, and victory only comes to the one who listens longer than fear allows, or who's humble enough to take help. That's the lesson every mother whispers by the fire. Be brave, yes, but be clever first, and never be too proud to carry water for the guy holding the torch. Knights sang it in castles. Villagers learned it by laying a muddy plank across a ditch, so the hunter in the trench could stand 1 inch taller and drive the spear home. The dragon teaches guts and grace in the same breath. Greed has always needed a body, and the dragon grew the perfect one. When people started burying silver and swords with dead kings, something in the village wondered if the gold would change down there in the dark. The dragon makes it simple and terrifying. A horde sleeps like an animal and wakes hungry, ready to claim a life a generation later if the living forget their promises. Later centuries kept the beast for a colder lesson. A banker in a marble hall hoarding, while the city starves, doesn't need a ledger in chapter 1. Just paint a dragon with dim eyes that never leave the coins, and every reader knows exactly what's coming. Dragons carry the cleanest truth about power. It is not kind unless somebody forces it to be. A ruler on a dragon throne is signing a contract in blood. Keep the rains coming and the granaries full, or the people will say the dragon turned away. A queen walking beside 3 fire-breathing beasts learns fast that glory and mercy have to walk hand in hand, or the crown is just ruin wearing pretty jewelry. You can measure that power in the heat of their eyes and the acres of ash left behind. Look where dragons came roaring back strongest in the last century, and you'll see the soil was ready. Factory bells replaced weather, cities swallowed rivers, and people got hungry for shapes that remembered stone and wind and open sky. Dragons marched back in ink, paint, and brass sections swelling when the curtain rose on a dark cavern. Science handed us dinosaur bones and said, "Here's the real story." And kids looked from the classroom diagram to the red-scaled monster on a hoard and felt both truths spark at once, one for the earth, one for the heart, together keeping a mind alive and wondering. And never ever underestimate a child's reason. Kids need something huge to fear and huge to love. They need a cliff to test themselves against, and a story is the safest cliff in the world. A dragon can be a friend if you approach with care, a lesson you carry to every living thing worth knowing. It can be an enemy that deserves its end on the days the world feels full of teeth. A good tale lets them meet both without getting crushed. The dragon becomes the toughest, kindest schoolmaster who never uses red chalk, but still gets through. There's the simple wonder of wings and flame. We've always looked up. Birds taught us envy. A dragon with wings lets your body imagine rising from a cliff with a whole river glinting like a ribbon below. A dragon with fire lets a heart that feels small and cold picture itself warm and feared for one blazing moment. Those aren't silly wishes, they're rehearsals for growing up, learning when to rise, when to be fierce, when to be gentle. At the edge of every reason stands the oldest pull of all, the serpent that holds the world together or tears it apart. The symbol is a handle on the biggest thought we have. Creation isn't finished. The world has to be kept. You can pray it into a ritual, dig it into a canal, stitch it on a jersey, light it on a movie screen so bright it feels like noon, and the tug is still the same. We love seeing the thing that frightens us, holds us, helps us. We love imagining ourselves standing in front of it with something, anything, in our hand that might actually work. And the strangest, most beautiful truth, dragons are so clear they can be anything and still be themselves. River spirit under a temple roof, old king of the barrows, saint's lesson in the square, voice in a cavern like winter fire, partner carrying you through rain, banner over a gate, plush toy above a crib. The shape holds while the meanings shift like weather over mountains. The creature walks on, large as ever, scaled with every memory and every need we've ever had. That's why they endure. Stone keeps secrets and coughs them up one jaw at a time. Fear keeps watch and imagination keeps slapping a face on it. Communities need a common enemy and a common helper, and one scaly body can do both jobs. Gold is still heavy, storms still come, rulers still need judging, and children, God bless them, still beg for one more story when the fire's gone low and someone has to get up to close the door. The dragon curls in that hush between the last page and the first dream, smoke curling from its nostrils, waiting for the next child, the next storm, the next brave or foolish heart to step forward and say its name. So tell me honestly, when the wind rattles your window tonight and the moon throws a long shadow across the floor, are you absolutely sure it's only the tree outside? Or is there just the tiniest chance that something ancient, watchful, and wonderfully terrifying is still out there, breathing quiet fire, waiting for you to be brave enough to open the door and find out? Because that's the dragon's greatest trick of all. It never really left. It just learned to live inside the part of us that still knows how to wonder and how to run.